Jackson Sangi Tam, Jing or Tanko Yam to Chavda, Guatam Somba Mam Chipa, Show and Grunza, Lamaram Boch. Jeb Jirdramame Balangur Abdo to the Bibi Shamsara, Kanga Jarzan Kazan Zimbim, Dom Brajams, Rizos, Yamdro Savi and Rogan Mukub, the Sricher, to Jinda Makan, Kuranji, Tansom, Ponchapi. Tawamba margar buja beteram dalu yen sor chong jerkum chen chen being o ni ye chen koron koridor tan chari yang jandar lo gon sor zon tam choki tombam som me ba makarar yer chuzalon de jurgi gomba mi o sar yang selon ki jan nan ze de shin nan or churki ndo don za kan chin chu gi yer bo la sham sa marwi sangim chen wan yang la kar kan do zang bu mon lam nan bar ja Kivji Jarvim Trillion Zabi, Jam Lami Javla, Give Sham Sar, concept of a Jampan Simgis, Yahupa Morjon, Chotan, Lordship, the Sira, Tobian, Jahora, Dagayala, Warsur, Chelsum, the origin, Kim Chen, Yasome, Conjure of Gelaso, Simchen Donlam near the Dobsona. Tambarnam Jinim Thursarta Sur. Oh, yeah, Tini, Tanam Katam Yambasim Gentamji, Tondo, Tandi Lana me Payanta Sanji, Compound Bochito Persha. T-shirt that Tambi Chu, Kajik Sani, Tani, Tonyam Solar, Jo, Yambi, Samba, Shanshmishot, Simkepa, Te, Totombo, the Yatan Chong Chiningatu.
So please remember to give rise to the purest, supreme bodhicitta motivation that feels, I shall listen attentively to the precious Dharma and put the essence and the meaning into practice in order to place all sentient beings whose numbers are as infinite as space, that they fill all of space, into the state of everlasting, eternal happiness, which is the state of authentic, genuine, precious, unsurpassable Buddhahood, the state of complete awakening. And with that highest motivation, we begin.
Oh yeah, Tinita, Natsu, Tatirong Lab Samo Town Chicken, Tini Tat Chutan Gawan de Shina, Nin Sambada was a guna, Tan Sambada would teach her the Yoruba. Natsu, Tini, Tatini Chiranto, Tayan de la Takazum Parchua Murchua in the Kaningama Cantaso, Carizinati, Chuta de Yons to Padashiria, Shiro, Tini Chiranto Samayan. Tarianjara, Nigeria, La Gauchon, Tenia, Pebala Tujiche, Zegios.
And so this is our third and final session in this particular teaching series. And so most of you, I think, are all the same group because this has been people who have wanted to come to do the full 3-session series. So I'm really happy to see you again, and thank you all for coming to this third and final session on the Dream Yoga teaching.
Tini Jibana Lango to Natika, Tambo de Caribshire, Chapari Lamna Tambo Tininga to da Shirtanga Malam Kurla to Jeshik Jabari, Tini Shirtan Malam Zia Tinga to Tim to the Shirtan. De chicken jamandra malam yapo tini malam yapo maim basi guna jiksronga tini de tin jamandra tim tu de malam tangayo ba de chig shirtang korang de rortang chire ta so tini ngare la tim tu de chig jiskin tim dir gana tim tu de chig ndi ba ga shawa ta maung pi ton da kashi ton ya yo atang de tini malam kare ni kare chini malam de tang yori tinda korla shirtang de shi Tambo Jabari, the Nibi Caps, the Dawa, Shidangabi, Nola Tim to the Da, Nulam Gertim to Danyamlin, Jeguna Nulam Gernam Jur, the Nusum go to Nina, the data, the Nulam Gerchit, Markarchiwala, the Gilugur Courting to Shabarawa, Dave Shadinar Gilugur Caps, Tim to the Dachig Lead Gimartart, Tawa, not Chart, the Shiba. teni sem mugir tawr tokbazi ta tienda goni ni ching nyam ni song song ate na man malam ngondo la ngi per de go yore tendi teron te la teni chran chu dawa chi gron la yang teni nyam len da wo tan teni to na cha yo jire teni nga chu tip shu ni mar ba jin de teron na jo ya rin do
That's all much. So we began January, February, March, April. So we've been doing this once a month, and our first teachings were in April. And at that time, we just kind of started out with a general summary and an overview, kind of to lay the foundation about the dream yoga. But before we got into that, we talked about, what kind of dreams that we might have, like kind of a little bit overview on dream interpretation. And for example, like when we have, positive dreams, favorable dreams, when we have nightmares or scary dreams and so forth. And we talked about how sometimes dreams are expressions of just like replaying of events from the past, but sometimes in certain circumstances, they can be sort of prophetic. And in those cases, sort of like how they come about through the interdependence, causes and conditions and so forth. So we talked a little bit generally about, what the dreams mean, the different types of dreams, different kinds of dreams, and so forth, just in general about the process of the dream bardo, the dream state. So it was a very general kind of explanation, the very first session. And then in May, we really kind of began to dive into the actual discussion on the practice of dream yoga. And so the very outset, or the primary, like first step, so to speak, in the dream yoga practice is first to train in what's known as the gyulu, the illusory body. And so we talked about that training and that practice of seeing the body as like a dreamlike illusory form, and seeing the speech like illusory, like an echo, and the mind like a mirage. And so sort of seeing the illusory dreamlike nature of the body, speech, and mind. And we talked about that. And so that was kind of what your month of homework or practice that you've been kind of working on, is this training in the illusory body and so forth over this month. And so now we come to the third session, and we will continue from where we left off, going through the stages of the dream yoga practice.
Hola, so teni da ti kaps chirizina shirtang di dela da pena nga chu kharsan teni ngma ka kawlan de sha yamba teni rangni de income jumba rani yetam da sar tim jumba na ngoro ramboche que chung gawa tirta song a tirta ji gomni ne dela da sem jen jo da tirta bi goni ne kharsan chi ta shi chik da de da wang mi no la teni nga chu di ngalam ko por sha yamba ni terang ya teni ti thokala ya chi teni yetam la sem jamba da yingre la sem jamba tible la sem jamba je ramba jen dum jong gore the so chi na da kong tar ja ta hi man ra wa goni shak yore teni marara so ya teni chi calm down wangbo je bona da muba na ba na chwa yimbi gemsengi na tabshin ramra yo na ya teni yego yo gore ma to ya tabi chik mo tamchil la ya kamro ya tenda ka wo yenjang de sunani kong jambo rang la teni choba yena de tenda nyamnen shini teni robo ya tenda rindwa.
That's all much. And also, we did talk about visualizing we call the yidam, the deity, as we are falling asleep, and where to place the mind's attention, where to place the awareness. And so last time we also introduced the practice, the visualization of the form of Guru Rinpoche in the throat chakra, and Guru Rinpoche in the form body like the size of a thumbnail. And we just place our mind's attention, let our minds rest in that state of focusing the mind on Guru Rinpoche at our throat. And then, so you probably have been, practicing that over this month. And we said that there are two other alternative visualizations and practices that you can do. And so we'll go through these together today. So the first is visualizing, any of whoever your yidam deity, the same way, like in the throat chakra, or a seed syllable, or also a tigle, that is a like a bindu of light, a sphere of light, a small tigle in your throat chakra as well. So anyway, there are many different methods, many different skillful means and practices. And the reason is because people are different and people have differing predilections and differing kind of constitutions and differing kind of interests. And so because nobody is the same, we don't have just one set practice that's universally applied to everyone, because that wouldn't work. People aren't carbon copies of one another. We're all different and unique. And that's why we have so many different practices. So anyway, we'll be going into that, and just whatever you are more drawn to, whatever you have the sort of predilection and the interest and capacity, then you go with that particular version of the meditation or visualization practice.
tini tayang tagade tamchu tarngundu dana tachaga chipanago chagde yora khasang tani kandashini tini tachiga nyarluk dana timtute manyar wirngon lana temtu tachiga lamala sorande palaso patendra kurchapshaswa tani sangi nyartabshini nyargoya dana tiso kolapshaya taso chama chiba marto teranga kapsen dala chika chasarayo mariti kapsunga to sheltria terindua.
That's what I'm watching. And so the preliminary part of this practice is the same that we explained last time. So like how you should position your body as you are going to sleep, like in the same process of supplicating your lama, and the body still in the sleeping lion posture, all that is the same. So we explained that last time. So it's the same exact sort of basic preliminary, even when you're doing a different visualization.
tini ngacho da sabi noa ti noni parta malam gar kapsun ruwala tela ngacho ina ta namjin chi nguzeng yo marwa ter par ni sore ya da ma ni tirngon la ko re ni chari jugla ngalam da tang da ko yo re ma to ne kanda chi ni song ya ti jejem de ti so da wo te ngacho namjin nguzeng yo mare yena kang star yang tela shirtang go tez da 지금 냠린다고 요 된다이나 딜라요 요즘 카신라보 gedini bar nin kuyanra ma tone dini dada ka chiksin di tangla tim chute sapi naina ka chipshima tela tema thot na nin tukur na am jong ya denda chik mai ba tela 요즘 카시요 ba denda chik ninsari samyanda wo songdu andala.
That's what I'm saying. And so this like kind of impression that we have, the sensation of being awake, and then the sensation of like when we're dreaming, usually we don't identify or recognize that transition between when we're still in the waking state and when we've fallen asleep and then we're now in the dream state phenomena. So usually we only realize we're dreaming after we fell asleep, then we're in the dream state, and then we wake up, and then there's this sense of like one moment we're awake, next moment we're asleep, but we don't generally recognize that kind of moment of transition between when we're awake and when does waking turn to sleeping. Actually, it is sort of a process of like a chain of events, like a gradual stage, even though, so it's not just like one moment you're awake, oh, now you're asleep, and then it's just very stark, like transition. It's actually a subtle kind of chain of transition. And so we'll talk about that, the transition between when you're awake and then that moment where the waking state sort of blends into the dream state.
tini tanga to nilla hundini jangyebi nirkamna chik chalwa jinanga chundi ndi korea ma tila chalwa lap kyora tila chik trodra oji chabonra o chigni ne tenda ga nawa chimjong tini tanga chi chukchup le gona muk zug nawa ga janyan ki tumu ga timchu te namshi yorla yo ay to so yorwa to so tini lirkap she ya de jigni chirna de gongji number ki bala chur de teni ki lirka tinchute deso mavshit teni te kale churtini sonine de yiki number hipa korang de ta nyonkana ganji number hipa ngong par ndojaya da ti kabla teni te ni thondo yore se da tenda shini song yore se.
So when we're really in a deep sleep, at that time, our forehead gets very hot. And that's because once we've fallen into a deep sleep, the 6 aggregates of consciousness, the sensory objects and their sensory consciousnesses. So like eyes that perceive form, the ears perceiving sound, and so forth. These sensory consciousnesses, they are withdrawn within. So rather than being sort of emanating out to interact with stimuli, they are now drawn inward and they are reabsorbed into the alaya vijnana, the all-ground substratum consciousness. And that's the time of sleep when they are not acting sort of extroversive focus, they are sort of drawn in. And at that time, these sensory consciousnesses are absorbed into the alaya, that is the all-ground consciousness in the heart center. And when these are absorbed into the central heart consciousness in the heart center, the all-ground consciousness, the alaya, that is when we have the phenomenon of being asleep.
Tani kanin ngama nga zu chutan tambu kawla tim tuti thamram nyehzia da wotinda chifya yemba dati ti thasuna mjongni ne shirtang tim tuti par nga zo tini ni khungro ya da ne tini chiwa tani ga haliwan jawo yo ndwa ti gyjem de pemes bin jawo yo ndo tini ndi ka se chreji chika na ni khugni ne da kan tar kyang de number ki pa kanji ngam pandro na ti ka se ne tini de jbangu shi ya che yo ba de chak sonar malam oxer chigni ne tini ta nga zo goji mo ma de chak yo re da ti og to sha kare tini ngo ma shi na te par soni ta tini yang de ndi nyangkani chur tambom jumba ga stankurla chur tini sem de long stala chonni ne kale chur tupshugla shugni ne tini rong stakur tamjalan cameraman da ta te constar cameraman da shugni ne ta khani lawem ba tini nglam garna wa yak songra manda kharni ne tini ten roti constar kya te wena ne chwala samop tana tim chu de wardu thaso chwa oxer mu mazen du tini te tim chu ta chuni wardo tana ta sapa wardu ngo to so te kharya ngo chu ya da o ten da she yore ani kar kamna ta te par ta khwa marwa ti gem sang ta di chuni wardo ta sapa wardo char ga mare ta mulam wardo ta charong yo ya ta ten da che ren du si
in the very first session, if you recall, we talked about the 20 stages of dissolution and how similar these stages of the sleep are to the dying process. We talked about like the stages of dissolution in the dying process and how there's a real parallel, a real similarity between sort of the stages of the dissolution process at death and the stages of going to sleep. And so in both of these, the consciousnesses are drawn inward into the alaya, the all-ground consciousness, at which point there's the opportunity to recognize the essence of your pure awareness, Rigpa. And so in the dream state as well, in that subtle moment where the consciousnesses are drawn into the subtle all ground, there's the moment of the dawning of the clear light, the luminosity, and that's the recognition of that pure awareness. That's what we really want. That's the ultimate kind of point of the Guru Yoga, to recognize this, right? And we'll talk about this later today, about this recognition. But what happens is when we fail to recognize the clear light, the luminosity of the awareness in that moment, that's when the consciousness then starts to proliferate out. And so, for example, in the state of death, then when we miss the recognition phase where we are sort of presented with that dawning of pure awareness, we don't recognize, then that's when the stages of the pardo begin to unfold. And then you have what's called the chunyu pardo, the pardo of the dharmata, the absolute nature, followed by the sipe pardo, the pardo or the intermediate state of becoming, as we call it, was like the display that arises in that intermediate state. Well, in the state where we have fallen asleep, after that subtle moment where our mind is absorbed into the all ground, and then we have that dawning of the luminosity, and we do not recognize that, then what happens, the consciousness goes from the heart chakra to the throat chakra, and then riding, so to speak, riding on the horse, the steed of the prana, the subtle wind. Then the consciousness sort of circumambulates all of the different subtle channels or nadis of the body. And we talked about that a little bit last time, about how depending on which of the chakras and which of the nadis or subtle channels the consciousness is traversing in the body, that will have an effect or an expression in the dream. And we talked about sometimes you have all different types of dreams and dream phenomena, good and bad, and all different types. And these are the effect of the mind. The consciousness is traveling through these subtle nadis and channels and, all of this. We talked about that. So in any case, at death, in that moment where you can recognize the clear light, the luminosity of the awareness, when one fails to recognize that, then that's where it proceeds with the other stages. Now, at the sleeping state, because it's not death yet, that's why the other pardos, the pardo of dharmata and the pardo of becoming, do not at that phase shine forth, but that's when you enter into the pardo of the dream.
Oh yeah, tenita kang start jang di malam main tatanga cho ta di injectin de la na ta chizegre ni kiani wardo yo piskavla na tim tu ter malam wardo muze ya ga thapin di kapso ni gyulu gom tumuchini na tim tu te malam wardo muze ya ga thap tada she gore ria ma to ne ni ran ni gugni ner ngalam tang kap ti thaso nyamnin che ge yenda ja da te yo mar ti thaso she chak sora kang star jang data she ni ne ti thaso data girao dubni ne ti thaso njiwo de mon de jerni ne ni da nyamne she thya thapshi tenra chi koram gur gimdi gu koram ra o tenra chi chakda yore te yang hakko go gondwa.
That's what I'm saying. And anyway, so when we have the pardo of the waking state, the pardo of life, we call it kine pardo, the pardo of the waking state during the life, that is actually our time for preparation to train ourselves to be able to practice the pardo of dreaming. And so as we are in our day-to-day lives, we are training the mind. Like I was explaining, we meditate on the illusory body, and all of this is training, is skillful means to be able to ascertain the pardo of the dream state. Otherwise, if we just think, oh, okay, I'm just going to go about my life, and then I'm just going to wait until I'm ready to go to sleep, and then I'm just going to go suddenly wait for the dream to come, and then hope that I'm going to be able to practice the dream yoga. It doesn't work like that. Everything is cause and condition, cause and effect. And so the cause of being able to master and practice in the dream yoga is to be practicing during the time when we are awake and training our mind. So that's the training, that's the cause. The effect being then we are able to ascertain the dream yoga, the dream state.
Oh yeah, teni daong tim chute da di thapshi sabara onde chayin sari da tong gor rambo chani ba yetamla yetam khwa shiba gomya tenga chu khar sangom ma shet sari da teno sambada ote Jumber meto padma di ndamma vjir and sondu dindi kap so muksarga di bardo tuko tim chute wa malam bardo kapna meto pamma zia ma to ndamma vjir chanzia ma to kumdo na tenche so mundu ga ta na tim chu di dan naro chutu kur kap na tim chu di malam bardo shapi kala meto pamma marbonda sondu tenda yensare tenda o tenin damma vje chambota damma vje yoba ni khila meto ko zendro yoga tenda chi gomgore zendu teni tim jamba ga chim jamba long khim khurlo ze dam jamba ga sang khur kartong la ta shirtang tim chu ten denda nyamne shepa kan yenna ta te chi te stana yogo yore tang sam padda tena jamman duga teni sho de chin khurlo ze ya Jumbalong Shun Kurlozia, Nyanga Chujin Kurlozia, and our still Turin Kurlozia, and our Tim Kurlo Jibotam, Tenda, Pekula Tese, Chanonsoyantini, Terestani, Tini, Parla Sobaya, Stat, and Yigan Ola, you get Sadanda Bogan, Latini, Gandason, Dukalakans and Stat in Rechina, Shurtaya Boyo Saritan, the Constar Cam Jumbalong Shun Kurlon de la Meto Pamamarunda Mavjenda Gumbores.
Ninkagi Longsu the Korlogi Ming the young Casson?
Show Dachin Kurlozera, Jumbalong Shun Kurlo, Nyanka Chujin Kurlo.
Oh, Chugi Korlori, let's
you are to be Kurlozera.
So now we're at the third different alternate practice for the visualization at the time we're falling asleep. So we've already talked about two, I believe last time we talked about visualizing Guru Rinpoche in the throat chakra, or you can visualize your Yidam deity, whatever the version of that is. And third, now we're talking about the visualization is in the throat chakra again. You visualize a 4-petaled lotus flower. And in these instructions, it doesn't specify the color. It just says a 4-petaled lotus flower in the context of these 6 bardos. But in the 6 yogas of Naropa, it's described in the dream yoga practice as a red-colored lotus. So most likely it's the same, but in any case, the instructions say you visualize a lotus flower in your throat chakra, and the 4 petals in the center, pollen heart center of the lotus. And this lotus flower, 4-petaled lotus flower with pollen heart center, is visualized in your throat chakra, like sort of on your throat chakra, the throat chakra known as the chakra of great enjoyment, Sambhoga chakra. And so actually, for those of you that practice with the subtle channel, the chakras are each like so. For the crown chakra, which is known as Dechen Korlo, or the Mahasukha chakra. And then you have the chakra in the throat, which is called as the chakra of great enjoyment, or Sambhoga chakra. And then you have the Dharma chakra, the Trigi Korlo, which is the chakra, the center chakra in your heart. And then you have the chakra of becoming, Sipe Korlo, in the navel center, and so forth. So you have all of the different major chakras, like the 4 or the 5 major chakras. So when you have time, if you can, you know, you can learn about that from looking at some of the authentic texts on that. But in any case, here, the chakra we're talking about is known as the chakra of great enjoyment, and that is the throat chakra. And so you visualize in that way.
Tini meto padman davji aksarvita ki wula tini yiki om gom tini mdenda a gom tini ris ne tini gyapta ta yonta ra ta tubjibo tim chute shubjela gom tini om ana tara labja yorwa ta katu yina tindari tini Naro chuchukur kabnaya tenda chini ti yeket sochipare om an tara tenda chini lab jangduk tini toso timchute de ta gomje naxar gore zam donto to kisala om de sa donto arsal tini ris ne tini gapta ta yon de rabje gom tenda chini timchute tambo tenda xar go dus.
That's what I'm saying. And so you're visualizing in the throat chakra, you're visualizing this 4-petaled pollen heart centered lotus flower. And in the center of the lotus flower, you visualize the seed syllable Om. And then in the front, so like facing this way, so in the front of this Om syllable, you visualize Ah. To the right of the Om syllable, you visualize Ni. So like you see each of the 4 petals, and then the center, the pollen heart center, Om in the center, Ah in the front petal, and then Ni in the right petal, and then Ta in the back petal, and a Ra in the left petal. So the full seed syllable arrangement is like this: Om, Ani, Ta, Ra, and it's the same in all the dream yoga practices. So when I say meditate, I mean visualize, same thing. So you let your mind visualize then these seed syllables in this pollen heart lotus with 4 petals. So again, Om in the center, Ah in the front, Ni to the right, Ta in the back, Ra to the left of this Om seed syllable. So you have these seed syllable arrangement in this 4-petaled lotus flower in your throat chakra.
Ar carbo tang teni ne serpo tag marpo rar jang tatina yang tentu tini teragam do yang shatan do tan tatasha parchir yopa cham gomna yang teni do tatasha chama haliwal gipa yang teni gomme khako mundu kamtar kan teni so te yige taso teni sarkite kachim borindu.
And so the colors of these seed syllables, like generally described as the A is white in color, the Ni is yellow, the Ta is red, the Ra is green. And these colors are described in the teachings, but not sure really. I don't think like it's that crucial that you have like a very vivid visualization of exactly the shade and exactly the colors and so forth, but just having like a general understanding, like, okay, these are the colors of these seed syllables. Most important is that you're visualizing the seed syllables there.
다 가르쳐 주대 땡주대 다 테스타오 사르네 다 흔히 프로그램 비니 갑나 라와 난 두수는 이런 밥진 남도 잔지와를 맞출 바 니 톱고 거리지만 더 팀주대 집삼니 영어 띠줄라나 팀주 영어 남도 잔바스케 예문나 텐다 영거 말완데 더 냐르람 비니 갑나 티 예나마나 더디 대학살 때니 디고니 고레 마트인데 흥마치 락사양 양 띠주가 저 삼도 잠바치당 되니 텐다시 냥거 말인데 마라 코초 겨름 나스타르 니 그냥 조고야 텐다치 척대요레고 그래서
And so the most important thing is that as you're falling asleep, this should be the last sort of thought, or rather a mental activity that you have. In other words, you aren't like just visualizing this and then your mind wanders off and you start thinking about all these other thoughts and concepts and then you fall asleep. The point of this practice is there should be no interruption between this visualization and that moment where you fall asleep. It shouldn't be interrupted by further conceptual ideation and so forth. So for example, when you're going to sleep, you visualize these seed syllables and such, and then directly fall asleep, so that you're not like visualizing it now and then, oh, now your mind starts wandering and thinking of all these other things and then you fall asleep. So the idea is to sort of circumvent the arising of other concepts and thoughts and to just let this be that sort of transition that takes you from the waking state to the dream state.
Teni tambo timchuke dengi ala repaktat. Teni rivshokshini rig nala repaktat. Teni gyab gatala repaktat. Teni ryong rala repaktat. Teni htigo teni rugana omla tia ndambaktat nine teni tia anyendogo res.
And the order of the sequence of where your mind should be paying focus is first you place your awareness on the ah in the front pedal. And then you move your awareness to the right, to the ni, to the right. Then let the awareness focus to the back at the ta. And then again, bring your awareness to the left, to the ra. And then let your awareness come back to the center, to the om in the center.
Oh yeah, teni that tiendapshina de tapshi the rendua the tapshi de yungdula that body tapshi samba already the tiendapshini rimjoni sona the malam muzin teni that malam muzini karishepure ta okto shakara tiendam jongore tiendar son yoris.
So that's the third practice method. So you let your awareness rest in these seed syllables, and then from there you let your awareness go into the sleeping state, and from there you recognize the dream. And we'll talk about how to do that and what that looks like, recognizing the dream, in a little bit.
Tunitan dikab gonna yike da an tara da tachasar bore da jangwa. Na di yike de la samok tana timchute the Gyatso ta boyuk jerjak tuni popa chiga namar samok tani roja yori. Tini konstar kyan tini ta yang shirjer chiga na boyuk tuni gore da lagjer tuni gore da tiendra yang chip samok chim jom chupa marwa. Tini te la samok tana kare jene na shirtan timchu tambo sanriga timchu jed songyen irkabna ti poka ke toni song marwa lagjer kirka tan palin rawo te da karon so lagjer ingire lagjer kirka ni toni song dire tini skabna nyam silenkan jagar ke te nyam silenkan tupchin telo palang naro pala so paina cha poyuk sarni ne te dari ke gum japa en mishi te lagjer ka a tang te sha ingire ni jiga ya poka timchu te nyam ba thamchala samok tana ta pod rang bi ge gum ni ne tini nyam shi yo jire te da sam kan dos.
So I've been sort of explaining these. So we talked about like you're visualizing seed syllables. So you're visualizing the seed syllables om, ni, ta, ra. And so this is sort of presuming that you're visualizing them in the original Tibetan language. But it's not impossible that you may be thinking, well, do I visualize them in Tibetan script or in Sanskrit script? And that might be something you're wondering about. So, first of all, when Buddha first taught the Tantras, they were taught originally mostly in Sanskrit, sometimes in Pali also, but mostly Sanskrit. And so you would imagine that when the, Panditas and Mahasiddhas like Nagarjuna and so forth were doing these practices, you would imagine they'd be visualizing the seed syllables in the Sanskrit form, right? Not in Tibetan, most likely. But then later when the teachings went to Tibet and, the Tibetan practitioners were doing these practices, then they were visualizing these seed syllables in the Tibetan language, in their own language.
이게 그 잔이 적비니까 지금 마스기니 좀지르 이렇게 기다는데 이게 제라고 막 동치 리모트여야 돼. 이게 문이샤나 연구요 말인데 이게 전시 그때 가리지 고리 디 즈ug라오 리모트라오리 막 이게 뭐마데 때 연구요 말이 이게 뭐마데 셈거나라요 빅답투시야가 때 연구라 때나 팀추데 다리가 왜나는 보바지 그 tini khena anda ulamna inchi chika anda ulamna chi lagjer kad man khan tenda chika anda ulamna tini ti dangde chik chigde yorwa di asia de ti dangde chik chigde yore de sura jmo go to yige jogon di murig manda da karig manda rara so yige manda ti ngore ma to yige te dang go tani te chigba chore sam go dos
Nazar moche. So we say the word yige or syllable letter. And for example, even like Tibetan letters, like they're the sort of visualization, the visual symbols or expressions of these sounds and vibrations. And so really though, the letters themselves are like sort of like visuals. They're visual expressions. They're like the drawings. But the letters that we see, the written letters, those aren't the original letter or the original syllable, right? The syllable itself is that which conveys the symbol, that which conveys the sound and the vibration. So when you say ah in Tibetan, or you say ah in English, or you say ah in Sanskrit, now the letters will look differently in Tibetan, English, and Sanskrit, but the sound, the vibration of the ah is the same. It's the same letter, same symbol, just written and conveyed differently on a visual. So the real letter then is the vibration itself.
tenda indi te counter yang te chonship yige dam chonsha dong yige te di ka yigdang in chonship remote when ta chira zoina dimtu te boyu higa mara ni sanskrit ta nga chu chamiya ta parchi ka yig ta chep chembo me pa yin jang yago ma chami higa mara tenda indi zong te ta rang dimtu te a na tara la su bi dang te la 소르신이네 되게 때 천식 이게 나바다고 하로나 다 인지 이게 나바고 곰나야 먼저 봐요 좀 말어 삼거든 싫나 때리 뜸투데 다직 된다 샤야 요래 싫다 때 럭저 같다는 때 보고 같은 손에 뜸투데 대지 저바토바다 리반점 바탐 지금 신기람니네 뜸투데 너가 투봉 그때 누바찬 조저 요래제 된다 송아 요래 된다 연양 연결해다는 너 된다 신럽시나 뜸투데 당보 럭저 같은 신기울랍 되니 포크야 신기울랍 되니 인지가 그 이게 야 신기울랍 내게라지 맞대야 신기울랍 메야 척이야 야다 김선만도가 된다 연장은 강스타르가 뜸투도 같기던가 안에 따라 도소라 시 뒤에 뜨금 손식 이게처럼 조카리 약사나 8,000릭지라고 삼고 도지.
네, 뭐지? 단다디 미지기 카발레네라 바로라기 암저 고마스 단다디 나 벽이 이게디 나칭 담보 렉자기 이게디 칭기랍 테니 디 젤라용 벽이 이게디 칭기랍 세용디 디 젤라 고마소 연결시소.
디질라테 다다이나 회나네 디디 인지고 이게 된다고 지금 양들이 곰니 영어를 관점 받아 저바텀 제고 신주랍다나 인지리게 나타니 신주라야 매야 받된다 저 점선문도 같으니 된다 신나야 되니 대신랍다 담바 인주롱와라 대나 되니 타식되니 되니 이나면 럭저다 보유권 곰고야라 장 캬와나 어째 여사 말에 삼고 오시대
뭐지 하고서 가르치. So you have the letter or the symbol, and that's the that which is sort of displaying the essence of the sound or the vibration, and then you have the referent, the meaning, the signified. So you have the signifier and the signified. And so the letters are the signifiers, and the meaning, the essence, is what is signified. So for example, many of you don't know Tibetan script or Sanskrit language hasn't been very widely sort of spread around, so most people don't read Sanskrit. But what's important is when we say like you're visualizing these seed syllables is just having the sense of that sound, the sense of that letter, that symbol, like the vibration of that, like so like om ani tara, like that's like the vibration. And as far as how it looks visually, that's sort of like secondary to just having that sense of those syllables being there. Now, if it shouldn't be, I don't think it's really a problem to visualize it. If you have the, as long as you have the sense that this is the sound, this is the vibration, it's this om ani tara, then how that looks visually, if you can't, you know, picture it in Tibetan, you can't picture it in Sanskrit, you can more easily picture it as represented by English letters, I don't think that should be a problem. Now, that being said, you know, they always say like, well, the Sanskrit language and the Tibetan language are sort of like blessed languages because they've been blessed by the Mahasiddhas and the Vidyadharas and the great awareness holding masters who have therefore blessed these languages. And so, you know, you should visualize it in these languages and so forth because they have the blessings. Well, I mean, if you imagine like first, when the Buddha's teachings were spread in the original Sanskrit, and you had all these masters emerging, and that's how the blessings of the Sanskrit language came about. And then later moving to Tibet, and then these masters practicing and then blessing the Tibetan language as the expression of the Dharma. There's no reason why you should be precluded from assuming that the English language cannot also become blessed in the same manner through practitioners who are attaining realizations and accomplishments and so forth. That why not? Like, why can't the English language also then follow suit and become another blessed Dharma language? So in that sense, I think most important is that you visualize the sort of the vibration, have to understand the essence of that syllable.
Lasso tenita constar yang ngatu sami te da ko jiri tan ina ngatu dazia datuzia tan kacha tan yige kan ina yang teni karize gore ti ramchan the remoton ramsang to ni zawani kor da ta yo marwa ta ko gara ngatu tan constar yang dini when you can all some of Tana A double data to Tijana, not to a luxury dimato, telating to the Z double Tela Zila Gure Lavjana, Zichogramato, Tela Yamana A, Yamba Tonam Sang to Yugasawan Yomari, Constarga, Toram Sang Tola Yikeon Yomari, Cadian Yomari. Ton Ramsangal Tola Yike me, Cadian me, Yike or Katam Shadonga to Sem Gotola, Totak any. Pada urjam ni tak kari lab gure draft sheet atau tonsir cang ke toni mar dini ten rogo yo pi gemsang kan jambu lan dela yang yige dramanda yo pa yang tere ba kan dramanda yo pa yang gemsang yang tela tugi ore ma to kon dini ton ramsang ke tola ka tang yige thamche yo na te yige thamche do dari ke jambu lan lan te yigrik sig ma to me par tharwanda ho tan yige te yang sab murgo ore hiwar tharwanda ho ten dramanda jonggure dini chama yang to tak dini trapshin in rogo yore tong tola yige tar ka to so yo mara ta te chame ha ko jire nga cho dapcho ka kam na jang yo ate da to so ra
That's sort of much. And so the sort of the symbol that expresses the sound, the letters, they're not inherently existing. It's not like there's like this inherently existing syllable. Like imagine the letter A, for example. We say A and we look at this symbol and image of the English letter A. Well, if somebody were to come around and say no, this is Z, there's no reason why we wouldn't start to read the letter A and pronounce it as a Z. So there's no inherent existence or inherent realness, objective solidity to the languages, not just objective realness or solidity to the letters and the symbols, but also no objective solidity to the languages. Like all these languages of this world, they're not inherently existing. They are sort of imputations of the mind and conventions that we have adopted to express meaning. But all of these languages of the world, and that's why we have so many different dialects and languages and language families in the world, that these are just the expressions, but they're imputations of the mind. They're just vehicles to express the language. They're not inherently existing. And again, like otherwise, so you can see how all these languages and all of these different symbols and visual language expressions are just like creations, human sort of imputations, conceptualizations. They're not real. There's no like inherently real language. Like this is the one ultimate essential language of the world type of thing. Oh, long life. North life.
That's contact and that if she don't and decals is got chimbo remond Diana and Jictin the Tida and Chura, Chimbocha de Ora, and Nanda Muchiko Monglavjana, Churanga Manda, which loves on that Nichoron Multi Tida Samian, Bimba Tama Narang, the same no like Yopaga Padra or Kantan in Ronduhoya, that day Natuna Namjin Dapto Kamishaya, Tiri, da Tehakosmora.
Oh, di kyoge chumason tanda di doctor gi kapsu nganso khandera wachi nganso gita parda boda tende ro
constar kan tini hwenan ta ngubo chira wachi yona ina tini popa mo chigla nan de chire je ni ngubo je stan jagna tini chire samni jima kawala yona maya chire samni na timtute the ngubo de chire tori samdu re ina tela tagyo mare mati semgna la partagjagoni ti gemsangani timtute dirka de she tabgo yore jima ton ramsang tola yiki mate ton ramsang tola cheze aga cheze kire ote ngubo mangte yopa ina tsawani timtute gare jikten la ta tarnyet mo mebar tarwa 자보나 날까를 식무 매발 타러한다고 때라 쳐거리 다트서 조르종거 가차리 기만도
okay 당니 지겨네 지 디기요나 마나 지세로나라 ngayo 지가 디 매발 태드야다고 디 양결심 마상에디
어때까리 제지나 회난의 자당의 이게 또 돈라 요나 회난의 이게 데 돈라 요바이나 회나 돈라 팀주데 요바이나 Zambolona, you get chick, then you marked me at the chagari.
Oh, di already go on, let's go on, let's so the essence here is that for example, we have these naming conventions, we have these linguistic sort of expressions of words, like so in Tibetan water is called chu. So you see water and a Tibetan person then like learning the name and the symbol of water as chu, the word for water being chu, then whenever they see water in the mind, the image in the mind is, oh, this is chu, this is water, right? But it's the same. So the objects themselves are not like married to the inherent name or label. These are just labels, conventions, because for example, like if there was just one inherent symbol or sound or like label attached to an object, then it would follow logically that the whole world would have like that one single object should always be called by that same label all throughout the world, but that's not how it is. And that shows the lack of an inherent existence to the labels, that we are just create these conventions. So that's in like the discussions of like, conventions, yeah, the conventions of language.
That's that's social the Malambardo Kapdam Jirgi Mamriki Countar Gatera Tariga Anatara Tomar Tonyoreta Yena Pinateso Hakos on that in Tunjiking Shawa Gacha Shadna Samo Tona to drop the Scancha Tony in John Dugia Hakona, Constar Gan Tim to the Egyptian dirt is in Try and Bahakona, Denzime Parchana, then you constar Canton, that's Chibachari, Tinisha and Dallas.
But the point of all of this, the essence is that bringing it again back to like in the phase of the dream yoga practice when we're visualizing these seed syllables ani, tara, and so forth. The point is that the expression of sort of like the conventional reality of symbols and so forth, of recognizing to be devoid of inherent existence, when we recognize the illusory nature of the universe and we have no more grasping onto its realness, inherent existence, then the essence, we recognize that. So in the context of dream yoga practice, it's like kind of like that point we're trying to make is that this is all like conceptual imputation, getting us back to recognizing the lack of an inherent existence or lack of inherent realness.
Oh yeah, Tinita Jimate na Lilawore, Dure, Jimate Tatira, the Kabiko Moto, Gomatna Tatachi Konza Nam to Gobo Chanida, Natinda, and Tarala Supala Likamo, Yonkan Gumna Tap de Yosari. In Temai, Casamboda, Shini Vilhaoda, Taji, Shini Gombayana, Tini Yungdo, Tinda Mosarni, Mazina, Malam Mazina. Tinim Jumbana, Tim to the Roti Tigleta, Tigle Carbo Chonchon, Chamata, or Tenda Chi, Tini Young Jumba, Notion Pulotilla, Sarnita, Timetro, Chicken Goman, Tilla, Stirchip the Sarnina, Tini, Tehara Semtan in the Marni Pujana, Tini on Madame Zon, Tenda Sondua.
That's what I'm and so then it because the next part's like really easy, but basically like for people who like have very active discursive minds, having this sort of very subtle details of like the seed syllables and so forth, it sort of gives that mind that expression, that activity. So it might be easier for some types of minds who like to get into like the weeds and the discursive thinking. And if that's not you, if your nature is kind of more like a simplicity, and then you can't recognize the dream or go into the dream state when you visualize all these different seed syllables and the 4-petal lotus and everything, then the next method is more designed for that, the simplicity, which is just, you don't have to visualize the lotus flower, the petals, or the seed syllables. You just visualize a like a sphere, a tigle, a bindu of light in your throat chakra, like a pea size. And you know, you don't have to visualize any like the petals or anything like that. And you just single pointedly, you just place your awareness on that sphere of light.
Tenita constar can go the tambo ngora la sim tapa, nipa yetam la sim tapa, and you somebody young Jivatile, Tirta when the tap you shajari, Nionchi. To remove Shini Gomna and Yorita, remove Shina, like our Yonatini, remove Shini, Tenda Chini Gomni, Consta can tender sheep, Shuchembo, Yamnatini, Dawashi, and Martina, Lam Zong, Tenda song, song do I.
Love them. Okay. So in any case, whether there's these 4 different methods of visualizing as you're falling asleep, either visualizing Guru Rinpoche in your throat chakra or any other Yidam deity, or the seed syllables as we were just discussing, or 4th would be the bindu, the sphere of light in your throat chakra. So those are the 4 methods. And if you like to do them in alternation, you can do that too. But in any case, if you focus strongly on this practice and visualization of any of these 4, after about a month, you'll be able to ascertain your dreams.
Oh yeah, Tenita Zento Chiroyaga, Takadawakari Chongorina, Tambo Chimulam, Mambo Hini, Mulam Dramanda, Chema Swani, Chimulam Tumundamanda, Nijenda. Teni Mulam Tes Tataina, Chimulam Tesoni, Mulam Teshana, Korum Menkanda, Muchina, Sarosar can my and Balirka China, young Gotini Tsunduna, Nama Mayandao. Now, Sajachila Sona, Tatandi, when American Dabona, Karma Kagi, such a Jamba Tunde, young ship Tunde, or Timu Korum Mepana, Timu Saromaya, Nigandua, you know, Chitini Chesser down there, Tama, which Korum Yopanda, or Chesser me, Tumushi Wanena, Mulam, Tumushi Wanena, Tinichi Zaya, and go to Yaga Stagdao, Tenda is.
That's very much it. And so the sign that you are getting closer to ascertaining the dream, the sign that you're getting ready closer to ascertainment is like your dreams will like increase and become clearer. Like normally, like we have all these different dreams, but they're sort of unfinished. They're like coming really and then changing. And they're sort of like these little fragments, like dream fragments. And there's sort of like also very unclear. So it's like 1 minute you're in one place, like you're in America, next minute you're in another place. And there's this sense of like there being no real sort of sequence of events. They're sort of like at random and unfinished, like no beginning and then going to something else and somewhere else, and all these different sort of dream images kind of disjuncted. And a sign that you are getting closer to realizing the dream is that the dreams will become clearer and they will have more sort of chronology, more sequence to it. There will be more ordered and they'll be getting clearer.
Teni yang tonda jambala mulam jiktok janmina da haliwa pan ditazo pan tojong gre 가르지나 di mulam jiktok 쳔보 shongyan다고 때나 미저나 teni o dama de niberden de mulam 인사리 막도거네 teni 누무지 담 종거 말에 상yan다고 때나 그 초라햄니 당보 팀주데 mulam 뭐 훅쳔보 죽기 돈이 정거래지 회나는 아주 뭐람 지금이나 지금 정 돈보 지금 거니 말 홍조 신이 적은 거 라관 담나 적도서 양 쳇. 양 홍양 뭐도 올라양 치양 요 등문 자면다 직서로 뭐 마보니나 초제들한 들라 dem마 말이고요. 상고그라. 니가서 때는 셰요리 때니 응람 때라고 때게 하장 탈치한다고 또 뭐람 년나다 사와니 멈텀 바텐라 지금이나 드무치는 곱죽니 뜨니 뭐람 제양 무제양 고다 어떠니 조금 그래 막또 남경 그 지금 뭐람 냐와뇨 같은로 지금 잔통한다고 또 조보직 투한다고 또 지금 남경 그 샤오신도한다고 텐라 지금 또 니제야 때지 까비까 보죠 그래.
That's what I would say. And so the also like the essence is like, so when you have like really scary, intense dreams, those are actually like most beneficial for helping you to just recognize that you're dreaming. The reason is they're really incredible benefit of the very big, like the real intense, scary nightmares is because like, you know, normally we have all sorts of dreams, but when you have a really, really scary dream, it's like very, very intense. It's almost like easier to kind of recognize the illusory nature of the dream as a dream, not real. Let's say you're dreaming like you're about to fall, like you're climbing on a cliff and you're hanging there by your hands. And it's like, you can almost like, it's terrifying. You're like hanging on to this chasm and you're holding on to the rocks and you can feel the rocks crumbling, like breaking under your hands. And you're looking down and there's like this raging chasm, raging river underneath you. And in that moment, it's like, you really want this not to be real. You want this to be a dream. So it's like a lot, kind of like easier to almost like recognize the dreamlike nature in that kind of dream experience than if you're dreaming like just a day, like regular day-to-day life. For example, oh, you're having a nice drink of tea, hanging out with your friends, you know, just doing your usual day-to-day activities. It's much more difficult to kind of recognize in that moment that I'm dreaming. But when you're having like a real nightmare, something intense like that, they say it's easier to start with that. The more intense, the more scary, it's easier to start with that in terms of recognizing and ascertaining the dream.
Tini kauntarjan tini kali ta chama zengorajima to tini mulam go chashi chigzini na jamba mazan nan riga marwa kali ta chama zengo yore ta go tinra chini chuk tini kali chini ne tini nam jungur mulam chu raujing mulam to soyang muzin tinra shona tini de ta mulam muzin ya ga tabshi shiga yore tini muzin ni kare shigre ola sha kare tini shirta zawani mulam mazan na 대나돈 가시요 바가 점천제제 when 담식 냠치요 반다고 대라가 같이다 되니 대나 되니 지금 스텝순으로 와다 셈께 봐 되니 when 나서 단대나 상을 그 주라 상을 나 되니 시화텔라 추동야라고 대나 강와당 시화 대나노야라고 때문에 남진 이견도야라고 두무셔야 임주대 잘라야 지금 할완 점고야 대라디 요렌데라 더 고초 지금 담스그라고 나라 접란 점제 잠비 왜나 뭐라고이나 두무 지금 뭐 사완이 기도면 kan 뭐 지금 두콘다만다 샤와스가 치잖아요. 되니 링컨다고 대라이나 대라고 lakana zi tangner gelasa pa melen jiraja tangmeyanda고 대라 신이 랑진 지금 상마친이 누구야라고 대라 대초 고고요 사린디라 대라 송도 되니 접란 점이야 당네 팀추대 디 샤와춤초도 셈케야 당네 되니 이갸라서가 돈 소란 돈 되니 착과시 대라시 고야 스타가니 자와니 마zem지 지금 당다 자와니 디 말람제야 고다 사와니 마츠나 영다 대초시 고야가 점선인 그래시
That's what I'm saying. And so eventually, you want to be able to ascertain all your dreams, not just like certain parts of the dream, but ultimately our goal is to be able to ascertain all of our dreams. And so even like the usual and the natural dreams, so we want to be able to identify, recognize, ascertain all of it. And so let's just say you're not having any recognition at all. So if this happens, that you find that you're not able to recognize the dream at all, there are a few reasons and a few steps you can take to kind of overcome this. So one reason is it could be that you could be contaminated by breaches of samaya. So broken or impaired samayas can cause that kind of block. And especially so like in secret mantrayana, that's what I'm talking about specifically. There are ways to sort of like purification practices. So you like confessions, offering tol, doing gangwa, doing the fulfillment practices and so forth to purify and restore broken samaya. Samaya is like your vows and your sacred commitments, and doing the 100-syllable mantra, for example. And also another thing is to try to avoid getting contaminations. We call it deep or like spiritual contamination, energetic contamination, which has the effect of sort of like being like a spiritual energetic blockage, a deep. And so particularly we say like avoiding the broken samaya contaminations, like those who have like broken their samaya, or also just like people who are very like have no moral compass. They're just sort of like very base level actions. They are no sense of right and wrong, and just like extremely sort of almost like their energy field is very base and very low. Then we say like you could get affected, you could get sort of like a blockage, an impediment that we call a jeep, an affliction that comes from too much interaction, because they sort of their energy contaminates us. So if we kind of try to say stay pure, like stay clean in the sense of not letting oneself be contaminated. Like, so let's just say somebody who has a very base level, really corrupt morals and really like has a lot of like dark, that kind of energy, you get something out of their hand and then you become then like sort of impacted by that energy. That's the jeep, that's the energetic contamination. So try to, you know, keep pure and then purify. So one of the things that the instructions, if you're not able to recognize your dream, then is to avoid energetic contamination by kind of like staying away from individuals who could you know, necessarily cause that sort of obstruction. Also giving rise to bodhicitta, and doing the 100-syllable mantra. Oh yeah, one thing translator forgot to translate earlier was giving rise of taking refuge and generating bodhicitta. Those two are also methods to atone for broken samaya and so forth. And then also offering tok and doing the confession. All of these are skillful means. So if you find that you're not able to recognize the dreams at all, try some of these practices and that should help to address it.
Tenitar malam zamba ngop tsukjongna malam zenya da woteng tera chikona ti taso teni yang ta malam nguzini malam churjir la hab gores churjir la ya kan rejina tang tangbo da wina khena ne churjir da wo ka kapsena khena ne tim tu rani ni jikchang da wo kina tan de malam ring jikchak ya kare yore samya da wo tang ne yang na rani dhali war gaskin da wo malam tera ni shona inta malam re tini tela chang muksar ke tini dembar zaya yo mare samya da wo tera go goni tim tu te nyamnen je gora tera she go du tini khena malam gar kapsena tim tu ta kyola so ba tang yang na ne chik tera ga chik chanzen la so ba shang ga la so ba tera ga chik rang de zaya da wo tang ne no chi she ya tera ga ti malam da wo ni gona tema ta to tan de malam re samni rang ni ni sta ta sang ge la so ba yin sam ja na lam sang rang ni ta sang ge chig ro ga ti ni ko zo par la ti ni no pa te me par zo ya da wo tera tim chu te tenda she ya tang ne ti ni yang malam ge ni kam na nje da wo timu no anda won charni nje da ga no chi she ya da wo tera kha na rang ni ga ska chi ke tema ta ta ne ye tam pe na ngor ta ko na da dorje prwan da wo ta na dorje nam jur ma da wo tera chi yin samba jamjini titaso lamsa chagro gale lamsa chani khozo yang chang chaka me par chani tenda chagre toso la timchu te star jang da da tenda go yore star jang toso te ta jang cha yin gre ta ro thob cha che yore si
la sir mujhe. So another thing is once you have gotten conversant with the process of recognizing the dream, then you train in emanation and transformation practices where you can like emanate out and you can transform your form in the dream and so forth, multiply yourself and all of this. So for example, like when you're having like a scary dream, a nightmare, then you can recognize, oh, this is just a dream. There's nobody to be harmed. It's just I'm dreaming. And then you can kind of change, you can kind of become the agent of your own dream. Or similarly, if you're having a very wonderful, exciting dream, you don't take it too seriously at the same time. Don't get too attached, because you're also aware at the same time, oh, this isn't real. This is just a dream. So none of this is inherently existing. So in any case, when you are asleep and you're doing this practice recognition, let's just say you have a scary dream of like, a vicious animal chasing you, like a dog, or maybe like a wild animal, like some sort of predator, some carnivorous animal, like a wolf or whatever it is, that's chasing after you. It's wanting to eat you and wanting to, attack you. And then because you recognize and know this is a dream, then you can just arise yourself into the form of a wild animal yourself, bigger than that one, like a tiger or a lion, and just like scare that animal away. Now it's no longer a threat to you, that kind of thing. Or for example, let's say you're having a dream of a demon or like a ghost, some sort of scary entity that's like trying to harm you. Well, then you just, in that very subtle moment, because you're dreaming, you just self-arise into your Yidam deity, into like Wrathful Guru Rinpoche or Vajrakilaya, or Vajra Yogini or whoever, and in that very subtle moment, immediately you've liberated that, whatever that sort of demonic energy that is arisen in your dream. Now you just immediately cut right through that. And so these are called training and working with the dynamic energy, zhejiang, which means it's really a training process. It's like training and practicing with the dreams to sort of sharpen that skill of working with the dream.
어떤이 다 그나는 종지근 직반다고 그나는 치라고 뜨무고 gyamso chimbo chir용하다고 텐다근 직반다고 뜨무고 nglam이나더니 땅글람임발 무진니 더물람레 삼니 티노라 냐브전도 아다 이문나 치가 토칼라 파르 깜바얌니 판도야다고 당 드니 메다고 이나 메란 직적된다 시나 얼물람레 두삼니 메가 노라나 드니 타카르 판도다 티타소 차제다 뜻적감 종 말을 하버트 로저나 드니 때 다리가 디 누바 쿡체르로 그래만 때라데 브루나 다르물람레나 드니 때 브루당 삼다 삼게 말마다 같이 뜻삼나다 드니 영 지금 여고 종고 말했더니 영 지금 직적되는 거라다 물람임바 신네 대파를 타카르 토지제가 도와가서 토지셰니네 드니 딱 조바가 냠는다고 때라 요러와가서 때나오지는 디무신이네 단 담은다 무서르가 첨다제 만두더니 물람라와 드니 때 근데 가르치슈데 쳐레지 참마오 덴버마이프도 반 천나임 바테 하고나 드니 쳬가나란 조나ያን 두두 쳬가나란 야나ያን 두두 드니 메가나라 때라리차 더 고레단 더 고 마리제야다 오체가 요 마리 가르치는 저 요리시.
That's what Moshe. So, and any kind of expression in the dream of sort of the fear arising of any of like the four elements, like let's just say in your dream, you're faced with this huge ocean waves or ocean water. Well, you're dreaming, right? So you're just saying, oh, okay, well, this is a dream. So rather than trying to escape from drowning, you just go enter it like a fish. You can walk on the surface of the water. You can take command of your dream. And so none of these sort of apparitions of like these elements could really scare you, because now you're taking ownership. You're kind of in the dream sort of taking action. So for example, you dream of a fire. You don't have to be afraid. In fact, you can just walk right through the fire and you won't burn, because oh, I'm just dreaming. This is a dream. I can't get harmed by this. And what this does is confronting and directly sort of taking ownership, taking agency over your fears and your dreams. This is going to increase your power, increase your skill and capacity. If you run away from it, that only kind of perpetuates the feeling of it as being real. And that's the thing. I mean, maybe if you're dreaming and you say, oh, this is a dream, you most likely you won't feel the need to run away or to try and escape it, because you will recognize it's a dream anyway. It can't harm you. And then, but the point is working with that tendency we have to want to run away from something. Instead, we step right into that which terrifies us the most. We just jump right into it. Sort of like there's an expression in Zhe, this practice of the Zhe practitioners, the yogis, they just, whatever it is, the object of their greatest fear and terror, they pounce right into that directly without any hesitation. And so in the dream yoga practice, you recognize you're dreaming, whatever arises, you can kind of take ownership and control, and you can kind of do whatever. There's no rules. There's no law or rules like this, you have to do it this way or you can't do it that way, because the whole point is that nothing is inherently real. There's no inherent existence. It's all delusion. It's the projection of mind. It's the illusion on the display. So you want to walk through water. You want to go to sleep in the water, go to sleep in the water, lay down in the water, whatever. You want to walk through the fire, walk through the fire. It's not like saying like you should do this, but you can't do that. You can do anything. It's all fair game because it's your arena of the dream.
Ni yang de da shan duwa ni mulam gar kam na na pe na na rang ni de dewa chan lar ga bo yo na da na chu na ji ni ta dewa chan la chi ro da sang ji o khong me gar kam de chi chu ji je san ro da da wo ten da sam ni na lam sang ro na yang ro ja gare de ni jar gare de ni de khor shang chu sen hwa ri pan zam ba nyan tu da chom ba la span da man da yo ra chang ba tang nyam de ni ten ro ya da wo ten da tang de vision de chi je chen ro ma in the yellow copy Jankam Tower, Podala Tower, the Nihasho number Gawar Tower, Timu Jankam Damandala and Do Samna. They might be on Chigrona, Chief and Dinikan, Gawanda, Wotanam, Tira, Shirjala, Teda Ziora, Angels, and Teda Tamyam, the Pernin Dory, and some Teda Dawichitan Yam, the Dora, Teda Karishina, and Juguri, Teda Shina, the so Anamana, Musum Jongari, the Nishari Chicken Dicals, somehow Yiki, Yiki Shed the Goring, Nishala Tata of Chibarit, and Tatangas of Hapo, Marawatanita, Mulam Gausa Teda Chitty, Tini. Tete tauna de Kariji Guri, Tama, Mus, Yamsun Toguri, Chigri, Tinia Tonda Jambala Malam Gurkab City, Mojala, Penanatu, Tomayan, Yana, Chokoina, Chokojala, Chicken Date on the Billas of Wachada, Samba Yopa, Nada, Tilam John Yoba, Jonian Yopa, Tenda in Nana, Titasona Chig, Hat on Hilko. When I am not to move Nadio, not to move Drinda, Dukana, to move in Zungayona, Titaso, Garda Las, Palams of Yin Sam, that in the Churning, Tozo Mapazonia, Jambala and Pantoya, that did the Moose Machina Pantoya down to move Jamada share Yoris, that's why Anthony Yapotama Shed and Dugayora.
And so, like, when you're dreaming, if you want to see Sukhavati, the Pure Land of Dewachen, Amitabha's Pure Land, that you really want to be there, you think to your mind, oh, I want to go to Dewachen. And there you are. You can go and you can receive teachings directly from Buddha Amitabha. And you can meet all Buddha Amitabha's retinue of the Bodhisattvas and the Vidyadharas and the awareness holding masters and the Shravaka Arhats and the Bodhisattvas all surrounding. And you can be right there in their presence, in their midst, in the Dewachen Pure Land. Sure, you can do that. Or you want to see Tara's Pure Land, Yulokopa, you can go there. Or you want to go to the Potala, Genrezik Pure Land, or the Vajrasattva's Pure Land, the Eastern Pure Land of Ngumpargawa, or wherever. Or, whatever Buddha field or Pure Land you want to visit, you can go. That's your prerogative. Or if you want to maybe experience like flying, like in the English or like Western terms, they say like angels, then go for it. You can go flying through the sky with the angels, whatever you want to do, because whatever you want to do, you can do, because it will actually appear to you, whatever you think of, because that is really like everything is the emanation of mind's projection. So, and it actually arises as if you're really experiencing it. And actually, in reality, like this waking state is exactly the same, but we don't recognize that yet. So first we start with the dream state and being able to conjure up whatever arises and to kind of go with it and the theme of our dreams. And then we actually experience it. Whatever we give rise to in our minds, we can actually experience it. And so like in the dream, like if we are, with our friends or our loved ones, or alternatively, let's say in the dream, we experience an obstructor, obstacle maker, someone bringing like, let's just say illness of terrible epidemic, terrible illness, then for example, let's just say the illness arises from the Naga family of type illnesses. Then instantaneously, you can arise as the Garuda, and you can just vanquish and triumph over the Naga-related diseases and so forth. And so there's a lot of benefit that can be had. Whatever you want, you can just arise into to conquer whatever arises in the dream.
Oh yeah, teni counter. Teni Danglam Taso Tombo Tezi Topano Yoga, when I know Chichimbo, you Mechimbo, Barata, Tina, she's on a Dino and Drogo Natani, Another Chagara, Yena, Tema of Samo Tip, Otando Mulamre, Savani Yoga Mare, Tim to Tenga, Mulam Gutazona, Mulamla, you Lu Yoga Mara, Li, Mega Chundroya, Lipoching Manduat, and Namkarta Orata, Chicken Jictom Jongo Mari, some in the Tozishini Takar, the Menola. Menola and Rochanola, Dantenda Chinina, that Musatim, the Dungerchakam Yunga Yomari, the Nira Timalam Capsa, Shibano Marto Chaka Dungan Yongumari, Tenda in Benit Kamna, Fernando, Wardo Labsamo, and Chivinit Kamna, Hersonin of and Sepawa Kabla, European Kapna now, Tumunjik Damana on a Titaso and Muzensona. Tini on them bardo de not in the Zupo Luzia Chimusatim to the Hata Ruba chocolate to move dripping Zupo Chiomare, then he made it to sugar, chariot on the Dallas of Bat on the Shinjelas of Sonchaka Gavion at the Socha and Jigomar, someone turn out examining the Sotama Chiguachan in the Jima, the Sotamala, and Jictome at Tenda Galekali Chakongre, the Haliva, the Karchembora.
And in the beginning, you might have some hesitation, some doubt, as you see like this raging river or this blazing fire. You might for a minute hesitate and say, can I really go into this? Can I really walk through this? But then you just remember, oh no, this is a dream. This is a dream. I don't have my corporeal form, my physical body. So everything is like space, like the sky. And so I cannot be harmed. And so it's easier to just directly jump right into that, step right into the whatever it is that is scaring us, because we know it's a dream and we know we can't feel any pain or any suffering because it's just a dream manifestation. And so, for example, the same kind of, when we get used to this way of recognizing, we're able to just fearlessly enter into whatever appears, recognizing it as lacking in inherent realness and recognizing it's not real, it's just no physical body to feel pain. Then when we are in the dying process, in the dying state, after we've died in the pardo, and then we recognize again, we have in the pardo state, we don't have a physical corporeal form of flesh and blood. And so we recognize that, oh, it's just a mental body. Therefore, I cannot be physically harmed. So there's nothing to fear. So when we have all the apparitions of the pardo state, like Yamaraja and his minions, the Yamaraja, the Lord of Death, and, with all the weapons and everything, then we can rest assured that we are not able to be harmed because we don't have an actual physical body to be harmed. And so in that recognition, that can also help later on in the pardo state if we become accustomed to recognizing that in the dream state.
Oh yeah, tenita tenda chini tam jongore kaartar kyan ngalam muze ya tenda ga thapshi tsola hamnam jongo yore ta kaarte tini tu muzen ya ga tinju te chignyo tam jongna panat ngoma te kala thugre jina nimbar gilu jama thapna tini muzen ga mare ta te ha ko gore tini na tung chiktere ni chire jina chik tarong te choksak djang goya wo tenda ga rang gar jila chig te nga cho se na ta ga te ndo yang sarong ni yapoji ha ko go ndo nga cho se yin na ting pu cheram ko wa thuma me pa machi mambo yo pa ta tar nga tenda ga machi mambo song yo pa te ta chu gu namba sang ji bi chu go ni sam no ta na te la yi chi cha ga yo ra ti rong la ti ni te chik de pa mer ge ap chum sam me pa nga ze da unda man da de pa mambo drip nyu ya ga ting chu te chi gyudrum mambo ndo yo re ji ma to ko ne yang nam ting nga cho la de pa yo re la je na yang shir ger te song ga re ni a chik de pa me sam ni Murgaya and the Tenda Namba Kala some Jongo do at the Mutendi no la de Payori Lamna Choji Maya Romari and Damanda Shinkan, Tessa and Izegio Marishon, and not to say and Korandalan and Kamdu like Gimson Kashi or T. Gimson Gana, the Shabashe on it. So China, then you need the Tapshin the Sola Tena Koso in Jong and Zungari, Chirina Mombo, the Yamu Yorimato, and then I charging all of Shadin in the Kasha Shaya, which Mari Moose and the Luchter Tabne, when the recipe that was Kalazoya America, Yora, Tenda, which in Luchter Tabla, Moose and Joya Yoga Kasha Tenda Rilla.
So if another thing is if you don't have an ability to clearly recognize the dream, another reason for that could be that you're not doing enough of the practice during the day of training in the illusory body. So that's another reason why if you're not doing the illusory body practice during the day, you're not going to recognize that you're dreaming during the dream yoga practice. So that's the first possible point, is like to do more focus on training in the illusory body during the day. And the second thing is you may need to increase your merit and purify more karmic obscurations. We say that, we need to increase the merit, the accumulations of merit and wisdom, and to purify the obscurations. Because like, if you think about it, like whoever we are, we all need to increase merit and to purify obscurations, because we've all had countless rebirths in samsara. From beginningless time until now, we have taken birth after birth after birth, and we understand this being Dharma practitioners in the Dharma Buddhist teachings. We say, we all have accumulated all sorts of negative karma. We have accumulated the 10 non-virtues, the 5 heinous crimes of immediate retribution. We have sort of accrued all of these layers of karma. And that is like what we call negative karma. In the Western kind of Judeo-Christian language, there's like the talk about sin. But sin can sometimes have this spin of like making a person feel discouraged, or almost feel like they're like a bad person, like, oh, I'm a sinner, like and then that's always limited to this life, like, oh, in this life, this is what I've done in this life. And so we think like we feel almost like discouraged, or a sense of like being a bad person, but that's not what it is. All of us, if we're in samsara, we're here because there are causes and conditions, and some of the sin, so to speak, or the negative karma is not coming from this life, but from previous countless lives. And so if we can focus on confession, purification, whatever it is, whatever negative actions we may or may not have committed in countless previous lives until now, we're confessing and purifying. That's another really excellent, skillful means to help with any sort of impediments or obstacles to identifying and ascertaining the dream. And it's not just like, these are all taught from experience. It's not just like reading it in a textbook and then just saying, oh, theoretical, maybe this will work. This is a tried and true, like a recipe. Here's exactly the ingredients that you need. You follow this recipe to a T, you're going to create the exact result. And this has been done again and again. So this is something that if you put it into practice, you will see the results as promised.
That's Tiningi Killa, Tati, Tondo Chimbujita Marita, and it is Shanida was in a Tame Bangala, so I now Tame Banganga to shit them New Yojita. I am Nuni, Yantati, Nasolas Pasoni, the Tata, Tame Bayum Kachi Yojamari, Mayona, Mudu Yoga Marava, Mudu Marava.
Oh, that's coming as soon as you know.
Ni love song, La Mason.
Oh, yes, so in a Samsung teaching in Gary or Tilagonta.
Parching loves on contact, something I've shared the young coming Ganoni got a shade New York in a chicken Yogeres. In a Tadam something of Shisha Yongajo Marima, Mudio Marisi. The Razita correction though in that.
One really important clarification to make right now is when we say that we've committed the 5 heinous crimes of immediate retribution, where there's no bardo state, you die, you go straight to the hell realms. That's called the 5 heinous crimes of immediate retribution. I mean, yeah, sure, all of us in some previous life somewhere, we may have accumulated this. I'm not saying that anyone here has done that in this life, because clearly you wouldn't be here. In fact, whatever a negative karma of the 5 heinous crimes, we would have already had to have burned that off in the hell realm. We wouldn't just have this, human rebirth, like after having just done like a 5 heinous crime. So that we may or may not have committed that. And then we go to the hell realms, burn through that karma. But right now, I'm not saying anybody here as a human being has recently in this life or in the immediate past life done the 5 heinous crimes. So I just want to correct that, just in case that understanding may have been conveyed.
Tini Tachre Diti Tana, the Gisor Malam Gaksala, and what they tico Kachashakuri, the Malam de la Gandam and John, the so Kadeshni Sargorizina, Tambo Kakari and John Yorizina. Malam Sanjam Ziata, Jinjam, Chunjam, Tongjam Zia, Dendra, Mambondo, Tinang, Vindu, Tenro, Tinang, Tambo, Sanjam Zia, the Karizina, Chimulam de Sanjam Zina Karachi origina, the Mulam Muzamat, the Mumtat and Romat of Nilam Sayar Sasha, the Dendram Jongori, de la Sanjam Zia, the Jongore, that the Dendra Shona, Karishigore, that Tikola Kacharova.
No, sorry, Moche. Ani Sanjam che tani nipa somebody ko mingi namjang den so sun ba.
Oh, nipa de jet malam jet ni jet joya ta ne.
Oh, jet joya jen jam la so.
Tani somebody en churn joya ta ne. Je pa tongjam je ja. De ta jiri.
La so ka chen chi la so. And so next I'm going to talk about how to avert or how to fix any of the sort of obstructive forces, or not, this is a bad translation, obstacles, I guess you could say, obstacles or impediments that can arise in the practice of dream yoga, rather the sort of detours or potential pitfalls. That's the right word. So how to, if you have any of these 4 pitfalls or obstacles that arise in the context of your dream yoga, then each of these has a specific instruction or a remedy. So the first is called where you easily wake up. Once you start focusing on like the dream and recognizing the dream, then you just get woken up from the dream. The second is known as forgetfulness, so you easily forget. The third is confusion, and the fourth is just like spacing out kind of thing, or nothingness. So the first is like, if you recognize the dream, as soon as you recognize you're dreaming, you wake up, so you can't stay inside the dream. That's the first one we'll talk about. And what is the remedy? What can you do to address that pitfall or that obstacle?
Oh yeah, tani ta tambo tomjam de na tampu mare sanjam ra. Tienda wena timpu tanga cho ngalam ga kaus de nipi nit kam nar malam chi mi tani data malam rendo sam nar malam znuz zento ra oshini ne ta malam muz na ta da kondo shapa na ojin tani de courant de malam ga kaus timchu malam turgir la sopa she jindwa tisongo tsugmutabni tani ya ni satang ni dia sadni ne tani malam ti muz ya ga skin fini ne ni dia sadda Tendram Jonga Yoris, Tendra Kat Joni Yena, Yatango Tishana, the Gagere, Tendram Jonga Yoris.
Tanda di konsogi di 이게 나라 맞아 주스 제가 마신 메스 인디 좀 konso diwa 샤기 두스 샤고 두사 담봉이 di
konso. Degree, Tangi Sanjam de Shadni, the Nitawaga Titu Japan degree.
Listen, so in this case, like this is where you have a dream and then you recognize, oh, this is a dream. But rather than being able to then, from that recognition, go into in a conscious dreaming state, mindful dreaming state, and then being able to kind of work with the dream as we discussed, you just wake up. So you kind of lose that continuity of the dream. So what do you do in that situation? And then after we answer this, we'll go into questions.
Tendra Shonina Karizina, Ripati, Nirjambi, Nirkamna, Njumba, Tadi Tarmalam Kortarkan, Zenjo Chiri, or Madela Kortarkan, the Tapshijo, Konshine, Nam Jumbala, Semtani, Malam Zenjo Chiri. Ina, Tanyo Dakari in a Sadni, Sanjam Dipshoniana, Teni Nira, Nirkamna, Wrong Ripati, Yanka Manchuk, the Teva and Tendra, Sankor Lamark Tadnina, Teni. Nidna teni tezer nid tugun dogre teni tarig ti sanjam goskunde jong mares chigre nina chire di tapshi niba chire di rong tombagam ternana de mumba zeguna yige nakpo de yige kato tigle nakpo shina jigen tigle nakpo tenrao gomnina dini de tenra shine na tem to de Sanjam Jonga Mare. The Shirtan, the Shirnande, or the Malala, Nid Mukukanda, Tenda, Nia Hongumandus and Cantu Moiduangato. Tenda in Shirtan, the Mumbaga Nawada, what the near Rambini come Mumbaga Nawal, the same that the younger man should the Hadni, the Mumbaga, Tigleda, what Tenda, the Boom Tenda Chin, and need Kuyala, Pantoyo, than the Contact Tenda would have Shirnigo Bonit into the Varchetes and Topoyoris.
Member기 티글레 나코디 가와라 곰거리사 디 깡베기
이제 스테왈라 곰고에 제 아테다양 두비 온디 값은 카운트로니다 곰고리제 장도와
나서르마체. And so what you do in that case is if you're finding that when you recognize the dream that then you're waking up and you're not able to stay asleep, what you do is you correct it during the falling asleep phase. So we talked about how you're falling asleep and you place your awareness into the throat chakra in one of those 4 visualizations. But if you're finding that you're waking up easily, then you slightly change this, slightly modify this practice so that when you're falling asleep, you place your awareness at your heart chakra or any of the lower chakras like the navel or the heart chakra, so that your consciousness stays in the lower chakras, heart and down, and not the throat chakra, because this will contribute to a deeper sleep and will help to prevent you from waking up during the dream. And that's the first method. And the second is you can also visualize that there are like the black colored or dark colored spheres of light or syllables. In this case, you can just do like a dark colored bindu at the soles of your feet and let your consciousness just rest there. So you're placing your consciousness there. Also, this is good for people who struggle with insomnia and they have a difficulty falling asleep. They say if you visualize a bindu that is dark, a dark colored bindu, this will help you to fall asleep and help you to have deeper sleep. Or sometimes there's visualizations of like the dark bindu in the navel center. But in this practice itself, as an antidote to waking up easily, they focus specifically if you want to visualize the dark bindu in the soles of the feet, it instructs.
어떠니 다 같이 직대가리 이제 나다 물람들 처리지 그 당보 물람 무슨야 라비장 와터 물람 망보 물람이야 망르 죽다다 물람 쭈르라 라 타마 자완이 물람 메야 때라 죽고고리 고랍 기름 때리지 마또 가투다게 물람 무슨 차르니네 되니 때게 아직 물람 근집나 살아서 쩐니네 디노라 양도 양도 때라 지금 말에 되니 타마 물람 자완이 메야 줘야 때리다 다 띠시 종아 주샵 그래 띠 가르침 보려 나 뭐마오티 죽라 해 그래 되니 나초 좋아요나 같이 시죠.
Let's repeat. And one more thing before questions is just this point, which is there are 3 overarching stages to the dream yoga practice accomplishment. The first stage is getting to recognize that you're dreaming during the dream. The second stage is increasing, proliferating, transforming the dream. And then the third stage is having no dreams at all. And so remember that even in the stage, you don't want to get stuck in one of the stages of just, recognizing the dream and then getting totally distracted by just playing in the dream field, because the ultimate end goal is to be in the state of no more dream. So we'll talk about that this afternoon. But yeah, we can take some questions now. If you have a question, yeah, okay.
Okay. There are a few questions. The first one is from last month that was sent during the month. When we are visualizing the simple Samaya Sattva while falling asleep and placing awareness on the mini Padmasambhava or Jhana Sattva at the throat, should this mini yidam be understood as blocking the channel, as when in POA? In some POA practices, the channel is blocked at the level of the heart or navel.
Da tabshe da ni kuegi tabshe ngaranzo gi de sa yondi samlo guru rinpoche yana ani ngazo da yeshe sempa da da kongi de tamsik sempa da yeshe sempa sundwa da ngazo perna yeshe sempa da guru rinpoche kanwa la ani ngazo gi da ngazo longche kholo gi da tewa da la ya gom yondi sambala da ngazo gi perna da ko za uma nang lo la ju de ba perna poa na je chene da poa nang la tene ngazo gi perna tigle da ani ni da ni gom di sambala da za uma Roma ngone better ko ninke katula ko kak de beso rabo ko da Roma tu bara ji so ya rabo da ko te wale o la Roma tu bara wo kak do ya so rabo da ji nga so gomgyo wa so dina jen rebe sa nga so kitende longche kholo na lo la gomyon de zambala ko longche kholo gi khoran za uma nangi di longche kholo khoran gak de be da kang de bara khane ra wo shi gomgores
다들 지금 준비 너바 다리가 단도 깨름 산이 빠라고 된다 연거요 말에 티난데 제가 살왔잖마 또 깨름라이나 저기 dorjichoga samkezia ngonsha ngapkezia da otenda omayo giskap gana tempute kirim sani pandra ore samgmandu yensa mare tini pena damsik senwa da yishi senwa tenda zero na ya tempute chi firtang ngap shirgid samda so te maha anani parla yoga tumu churka da ochirendo ndi kapse chereji chik ro tindi tenda chi so tempute ndumbalong shin korna na yo samni tel hozo shini semta ya mak to gana tini jamba 더거는 팀 주대 지금 와르도 담데라 요피 콜라 카샤자 삼로자와니 땅고 문두 데니 다가자랑 거를 못 치게라 요바다네 데니 무쿠시니네 데라 셈타니 다소 셈텔안 쟁교 어떡할지 우리 막 또는 묵살근데 팀추 지금 와르도 담데리 카샤다 데네 치셔라 말에 바르도 칼라 데라 셔탄 디 자고마고 요다 요르바
So this is not really like a full-fledged exact Mahayoga, like, or not Mahayoga, sorry, deity yoga development stage visualization. Like it's really more like just like a general kind of loose recognition. It's not like this very intricate and detailed, like all the stages, like, because you know in the development stage deity yoga practice, you have like, and specifically like Maha Yoga, Anu Yoga, you've got, you know, like the Samaya Sattva seed syllable, you've got the Jnana Sattva, you've got the stages, the seed syllable arising into the deity and all these. So you don't have to get too worried or sort of too caught up in like the details, because the essence is that just like this sort of loose, relaxed sense that, oh, Guru Rinpoche is there in my throat chakra, but there's not so much as far as like the distinct location or the distinct this, because in the Bardo teaching practices, we're not focused so much on the elaborate or the details of the visualization, more on just like, you have the sense like, oh, Guru Rinpoche is there in my throat chakra. And the point is just you're placing your awareness there, and with devotion and faith in Guru Rinpoche, and let your awareness just rest there in this general sense of like Guru Rinpoche in your throat chakra. But when it comes to Bardo practices, we're not so focused on, you know, like the central channel. I mean, sure, there's the channels, but there's not like that real focus on the location or the details of the visualization, more just this general relaxed, it's like loose, like relaxed visualization, like that is there, and this sense of it being that there and placing the mind's awareness there.
Next.
지금 근데 실제지 그 실난데 할리와 깔침보린도 저런저 할리와더니 실던 이제 여보 뭐 하고 요래 옛날 철에지나 영치 그 베나는가 존전자라고 지켰더니 소장 럼바진데는 시야가 고감로 오지다 말았더니 아주 mambo 짓고 다나 간이지나 특바라로 소수갑고 베나는 티니 자년 투태바랑 기르태바 샹치 생회 태바더니 태바 침보당 태바 청어더니 ngọc 갑니나 실기다 나르기 실길라 알아서 도서 야 쇼치니 근데서 참마다 돈덕 집샤고래 참마야 셈전직 상기야가 답시 집샤고래 정무사는 가라요 말에 옛날 알아라 소수갑라는 야 묵서 가라라 소수 지금 람직 냠스 렌도고래 대소파는 축니는 직가리 직근전나라 직주니 샤나야더니 예서 상로다잖아 빼 가리 크고 청도고래 대소 소소에 와야 고시야다는 니야 근접다는 돈담 것까지 안 돼서 고시야 그래서 할리와 같이 보여래 막도 야 근접다 돈담니가 제자가 한다고 정돈 당이던요 지시간다고 대라치 쇼소나 자와니 영도 고와야 공물론 도가다 만들 게그래 카타 요거 말했더니 다다들 저와야 고리 되니 응말에 덴바리 된다만 보여래다니 옛날 디수다롱 테라 지카리라 고리다 테 셔터 다다제샤야테 건조당 돈담 장돈당 이돈 대바라나 소수갑나 아무서가 tingi 구바다 공무시 터소 라텐 인조고야 테라렌도와
나서르모체. And one more thing is just, it's really, really good, really important. when you hear a lot of different teachings, that each teaching has its own sort of family, its own context within which these practices are taught and revealed. But if you've heard a lot of teachings from different levels or different traditions or different contexts, most important is to kind of keep those contextualized within their own individual family of teachings, because each vehicle, each yana has its very specific instructions, specific visualizations for specific stages, like the Shravaka, the Theravada, the Pratyeka Buddha, the Bodhisattva, the Mahayana, the Hinayana. The secret mantra even has the outer tantras and the inner tantras. And so it's important, like in one sense, there's no contradiction, right? Because everything is designed one point, one ultimate objective, which is to bring the sentient being to become Buddha, to awaken. But from the individual instructions, as far as like the method or the doctrines of practice, keeping them in their own, like distinguishing them and not conflating or letting them get mixed. It's easy to kind of apply and see like the similarities, but don't mix the practices or mix the visualizations, because each tradition has its own unique set. And also, like, the two truths, the two dimensions of reality, relative truth, ultimate truth. Also make sure you know which context you're talking in, because you don't want to mix these either, or like provisional teachings versus ultimate truth teachings. Those are also, make sure you always recognize what is the context within which this is being explained, because when these get conflated and mixed, then there's a confusion, there's an inability to understand. So that's why, again, it's really good that you're able to recognize all these. Just make sure that you keep them couched within their own family of teachings, that in each tradition within its own, because everything has its own unique instructions. Each vehicle has its own specific objectives, stages, and view.
Okay, the next question is it a good sign or a bad sign that this practice seems to be leading to greater difficulty so far with distinguishing dream events from waking world events?
Khenpo, the nyamlen di chene da gyulu jane ni thingsa chisore da nilam nang la chik ni drea ki chik ngaso chik jambos ngaso jengyor wa nga nilam nang la dende thong song la da nga nilam ni song la da ba ani da sepe kapso ko da nime kungi kap ki te ngara so di thong song la ne di mi di nyam do keche she song la ne da yang chik jamba so yang di zambala samsam la dingi keper da wa chi shang ma tu ba da wa da chisore da shenje che ma tu ba da wa da cha de yeres di zangta gre nyen ta res ta o di nilam na la den de chung so la ne o jikte na la wone di chung so la ne chik keper shang ma tu ba da wa den de cha de zangta gre nyen ta res di yakore is duk cha res
ti yago injiri tina nguni shon na tini ka nga chu ta da ka ngma la yen ba shi tang nga chu ta da yang de yang nguni sha na chi ge yer phakwa chi ge martin du na ta nglam ta na ta ta ndan na ni ga yang chwa chi ge to ni man ro ya ma to na di ta ta ji ren thang chen bo da mlam ji ren thang ma mo chi yo ma ra ni chi yang chwa re ten di te yago injiri yen na yang tim chu ta mlam ge ta so te ta u 다리 그 나와 탐치던 트라이엠 바 나오진 다스타양 팀추데 팀무근 트라이엠 바테다 야고 갖고 손나더니 첸 다스타라양 되니 데라 판도요 그랑아 좀디 가리 라보레 첸데라 당진 총르도니더니 당진 총르도나 당진 라 템비는 도처다 제르다 템무 당마르게라 소파 메르도야 텐다 그 조금 좀 그래 그래서 여고인지래 나
That's what I would say. I think it's a good sign. You ask, is it something good or bad? It seems like it's good, because ultimately all of these present lives appearances are illusory, and it isn't like the illusory nature of the waking state of this, waking day-to-day life of the present life's experiences, and then the illusory nature of the dream, like the dream illusion is somehow a less valuable or less value than the waking dream-like nature. So these are both equally projections or display of our delusion, our confusion. It's illusory, both equally illusory. So if you can recognize this, that's good. This is a beneficial. The more you recognize the illusory nature in the dream, the more this benefits carries over into the waking state, and you're able to see the illusory nature, dreamlike fabric of the waking life as well. This is a benefit And the thing is that the point is that it should be making your ego smaller. So like the grasping at a self diminishes, becomes less and less. And the more we decrease our self-grasping, our grasping at the realness of a self, then the more we notice our emotional poisons and kleshas like desire, anger, ignorance, pride, these also naturally begin to decrease. So of course, it's all good. It's, beneficial.
If we come upon energetic contamination from another person, is there a way we can avoid being contaminated at all by that person? Some kind of protective practice we can do? Or are we inevitably contaminated from that contact and then must do purification practices? In my work, I frequently have contact with such persons, and protection from contamination would be great if possible.
먼저 집 가세요, 제로. 근데 지금 미쪽 집 잡아다 냠 집슬라스 받는데 집마 라면라든지 포야요리. 아니 한 삼삼랑 안서변에 미 집체인다 버지 다 저와 제 고투나. 아니 간서 알레 저와 마체 코네 간서 집숭라 버든데 요르베스 베나 미디 인지민지 저와 직체 기소레 마체 타메르 지나 코랑스기 미디 저와팅엔디기 레카 레사들라 다 집카 요켄 깡깡데 투 고기여레스 마투 코네 아니 치서고레 다 시소 집 호차서나 다 제야다치 메르베스 간서 인지민지 샤과체 아니 근데 저 제고레스 야만아니 코다 미 집첸 염도 야마데 칼라자 게제셰데 제나야 소 디마 포야는 탑시 요르베스 당분이네
나스라스 땡마리 때 요지레나 데니 셔나가초 셔당 때 기 접지야티 zemgoyari yena halibayo jetak jengoyo mari cherejina tamag janjir jangan son penjia she yo mari so rangli la tugure ma to janjir yena manda dewachen dendozia kawi khore ngan son pedozia tenda chimboyo mari yena jupsuqala teni warchana ndam jong segore tiestunga la shirtan chi chunga ga ngta nam dabat mudamra yore yena to so manjum na ten di shashib semra gum teni tenda sinena teni niparte de strongore tamana teni rani te temu trbyo sirni landro gona tambor kamro da undon komchuksumla sora tap teni sarji kapse semission sro abdunam shevi sapar matubchang chide trum yam shawlo ne tukirja madengi berki parndo tenda sonora kamatar kya teni kapsro adam shashib shok de semke tenda sina niparte strongore ti tokala taron sang teni pena ngada tenda don tenda sina teni jongore 다리가 반독된 종거래 또 샹시부가 셈라고 대다 피고래 막 동양 접요 사태 코직 멀둑자리 접 요래 삼니니 지금 남바라 오자요 말에 가르제나 땡아 초양더니 다 제 셈진 탐철 라양더니 다가 좋다 파마 당네더니 본다당 나마금 제르도 용 감마도 막 또는 잠비 지금 잠바치 요 말아 디션나더니 샹치고 셈 콜랍 샹치고 셈곰 라니 디스캡선도 디토칼랑가단 돈 데르시나 파드닌 두로지야
나서를 뭐지 다다 직제된 연결성으로나라 다 상계
근데 길라미 감난데 라송요라 상기 캡스 셈전 선로와 든남 시위 사파르 머탑자 처첨냠 샹로는 축기르자 머댕이 버키 파른도 다측지면 디나 테라 노리오나 닌카요리 당이 론동고요레 강스타르강나 데렌데 다 상트무가 공축섬나 캡스 소나 드르시 드먹시와 동시르 no 바지가 탑고 말에 와치강가 축고 말에 지가 거 말에 텐다 송자고라
나도 가른치
텐다 mambo 송요리 텐다 mambo 노거 감나 송오라
That's what I'm saying. And so another thing is like you don't have to be like hyper paranoid about oh no, like I don't want to get contamination, energetic contamination. I mean, you want to be as much as you can, like consciously aware and try to like avoid like purposefully like getting embroiled into some sort of like energetic contamination, but otherwise you can kind of like the thing is that nobody can send you to the hell realms or the lower realms. Like we send ourselves to the lower realms through our own negative actions, so you don't have to be that afraid like that. And similarly, like it isn't like because of interacting with somebody that's very like great, like they're gonna just take us with them to Dewa Chen. Like we basically we are the agents of our own destinations. And so in that sense, like, as far as like how much harm that they can really have on us, they do harm us, of course, because when we have jeep, when we have energetic contamination, this can cause so many different obstacles for us. But there are, of course, sure, there's plenty, probably mantras and visualizations and things you can do. But if you don't know any of these, then just always remember bodhicitta, meditate on bodhicitta, compassion, go for refuge before you interact with anyone else, you know, go for refuge, give rise to bodhicitta, compassion. In the Gyut Lama, in the Uttara, it talks about like Lama, it says like, you know, the Buddha's followers, Buddha said like, my followers like are, you know, so exalted that even like for many Chewa Dungchar, like for like billion years, like you will not be harmed if you become like my followers, even if they lose their vows, even if they break their vows, they break their vinaya, their disciplines, still they are more exalted than the ordinary like people. So like the benefits of like going for refuge in the Buddha and giving rise to bodhicitta, and you know, do some mantra, give rise to bodhicitta. Like the thing is that most important is bodhicitta, because you don't want to be like to the point where you're like, oh no, this person over there, they have deep, they have energetic contamination, oh they're bad, you know, like ward them off kind of thing, because you know, more beneficial, like we cannot avoid interacting. We have families, we have spouses, we have to interact with people, and so we don't want to become like antisocial and like totally removed. So most important is give rise to bodhicitta. Whoever that person is that we may be concerned about the jeep or contamination, you know, direct that bodhicitta to them, go for refuge, generate bodhicitta beforehand, do mantras and so forth.
Did Sikje di sang a gertan dinaya?
Dixon, Tezeri, Comchuk Sumla, Gyatso, Son Tani, Zonte, the Mopshiva Tomshuka, no Payam Matup, Rangayan Gacha, the Tim to the Tachiga, Tatum Yambalas of Wishon Mambo Shona, Comchuk Sumla, Gyatso, Chico Mapurna, Tagayan Tim to the Kivashima, Nanso Sumla, Mando, that is a jabber.
Yeah, Rumachiki Zikta Latene hanging or Bahakos on teaching. Oh, sorry. I just have to correct this because I looked at Khenpo Rinpoche's look and I said, I don't think he's satisfied with how I translated that verse. I knew it. So I was like, I'm going to retranslate that. So going for refuge in the 3 jewels. Buddha said, if you go for refuge in the 3 jewels, then you will be invincible to like harm for many billions of years. Like, for example, even if a person who takes refuge in me in the 3 jewels, even if they break their vows, as long as they don't give up their refuge, one thing they keep is they always keep their refuge in the 3 jewels. Even if they break all their other vows, they will never fall to the lower realms. They'll be protected.
And there's one more short question. To clarify, each of the visualizations that you gave, Guru Rinpoche, the Yidam deity, and the lotus petals with symbols, and Tiglay, can we choose one of these to rest our awareness on? And can we use different ones at different times?
Oh, they don't take it so rati. Not so much in a gomna digres, Yamana, not a cup la chigrang, damne, gomna digres.
The Songjang do de la Tinder Lavshan do lost for Tinder.
Yeah, that's what it says in the instructions. Either one or all.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Lasso. Then we do the short dedication for Karitanga.
Morning session.
Ninjarion, Shito, right?
Yeah, so see, 1:30, right?
1:30. Yes. We will return at 1:30.
Need to talk at you, night to Sula.
Choose a diba, choose a junior.
Choose a Iowa.
Oh, Iowa. What is it? What time is it? Choose
an hour and a half from now.
Oh, yeah.
Choose ore. Choose Sumdan Chega in Zara, from Machiki Sumdan Chega.
No, so that's. Sunam de Tamja Zubanya Tone Bidana Banshi Chans Pirgana Chivalon Tupai Tibin Zoli and Dua Dura Show and Japara Chitram Chimbata Ganda Zambo Division Data Kanji Jisa download. Give on the Tamja Raptor. That's what we check. Yeah. That's what the yeah. Tanga to shit over ta chuti de mumtata ta marando yin. Tana tini Gyatso kare ti kare lab origina ta jisur malam di kak salwa ta wokon domba ya tinda shaya chore tika ben malam ga kak chasar ya tika la yore wa.
So we're going to continue where we left off earlier. And we're in the chapter, so to speak, of talking about how to remedy and clear the various types of obstacles or pitfalls that can arise in the course of the dream yoga practice. And then we'll talk about how to grow how the spiritual evolution or the progress, deepening and progressing in the practice. So those are the two major sections of the afternoon session today.
Tini tada kong de nga to sanjam je da de yermalam tes muzna ya tini yar sad ni namam tatan ro mathapna ki kek sar sirte sha char song a tini nyanga man chala sim jen je ra wo tang na tini chi mamba ga tle counter lab gom je ra wo tin ra ga durduna tin ra ya song ni na sha char song ri.
That's all. So just to summarize, we talked already about the first type of pitfall or obstacle, which is easily waking up from the dream state. The moment you recognize the dream, you sort of trigger yourself to wake up. And the remedy or antidote for that we discussed is to, when you're falling asleep, rather than placing your mind's attention in your throat chakra, you place it either in your heart chakra or in the lower chakras, or you can let your awareness rest on the like a dark colored bindu in the soles of your feet.
Tini nde yore da ni ba tim tu te jet jenjam ze jendro ya tini mum tat yang zin ma to ya te song yore te kan da ji nar malam mini ne tini malam go tari go te cham tini go ni te cham malam muzin ni ne mum tat ma do ya ndona tini ni ka ta sad ma song na yang tini yang mar ni ne ngalam muzin da tin da chin in de thang rengala ti cham zin thang rengala muzin tin da da cha ma tin da o chin in de tin da ro ya timu go war che chung jwa yu re je ga dwa.
That's very much it. And the second type of obstacle is known as like a forgetfulness, which is basically where you're not able to sustain the awareness of the recognition. So you might have a recognition that you're dreaming, and then that goes away again, and you go kind of fall back into sort of an unconsciousness type. And then you maybe recognize it, and then you don't recognize it. So it's kind of like there's no continuum. It's not like able to maintain. So you sort of like you lose that recognition. So that's the second type of obstacle.
Teni te yen chuko teni muksar ka nyembo da okare go go origin yena nyembar ta ga te gilu jang ya da gilu jang la ko la yong ko ra ma bo do ta nga chung ma ni sha char wa da ta chama mar la ya cher sha na te ji ti cho da chama ri ga ma ra ten di te gilu go ya teni te hali wa kar chim bo ta ne tim chu nyembar ka ni kap na da ndu wa ta ndu kwa ta nyal wa ta chapa la so wi sha wa kan ri shi kari shi ba yen na ti ka sen chama malam yen nyam ba ta ne tim chu te sam jo ta ne tim chu nyal rambi ni kam na ha chang dum ba chak go ni ni bar dar malam de nguzam bar shar go sam ya ga ni sam no hu chen bo ta yen shi ni na te ni ta da jenjam ze ya te me me par chang ro re je ndu.
That's very much it. And so what is the antidote? The special antidote for this, it says, is to do more training during the day in the illusory body. I know we already kind of went over this before, so I'm not going to repeat it because we want to make best use of our time. But basically, it just means like every activity you do during the day while you're awake. So like that includes, walking, eating, sitting, talking, going, coming, whatever it is that you're doing
there's this constant reminder, meditating on the illusory body. This is an illusion. This is like a dream. This illusory body practice during the day. That's one of the antidotes, especially for that forgetfulness in the dream. And the second one is, and so like whatever it is you're doing, whatever action, just constantly bringing it back. This is just a dream. This is just a dream. And then right before you are going to sleep at night or whenever, sorry, Rinpoche did not say at night. Translator added that by mistake, sorry. Whenever you're ready to go to sleep, then you should give rise to a very strong and intense, fervent focus and aspiration that feels strongly like I will absolutely recognize the dream this time. I will recognize the dream and go into sleep with that fervent focus, that fervent intent. So you're giving rise to a very strong intention before you go to sleep. That's another antidote for that forgetfulness.
Teni tata di namjin chiga kacha par takarnya jigna tata nga chunjik ten de chamao ngelam re sam gore samna teje ke mulala go samlo tana khensa wona untoni ta ten de ta ga chiga chulu pa go shatang jigre ma tata da ngelam mare samni da tata nguni re teni de samya ti ta kare je gore ta chiga maim bala ja chiga churanda o maim bala yembar zongwi chiga samlo ten ra jigre samya da churwa ten ra chiga sekore Yena nguni samlo tana tani tarti nawanda yang tani ngalam nguni nawjin tani churwa churjang cherde yore te yoba tim chu te tendi hwena nga chu omagar kap gona tani rikpa jamanda duwa te sola tini na ta thanye kana anda ta tamchu terang nga chu de tini ndepshaya da tang yike tang ka shaya ro te nawjin de changma yang nga chu churni par Churnina teni injecting di shawande shekoya ma to ko nguni go toni shekoya meya ndo so yemba te ni lungra yo yore te mbi gem sang teni injecting de data nga churmalam na jin teni chipa yen chura yen samya te donggo toni samlo manchura na o nguni ra ji chede yo ba.
So like we were talking about training, you know, we say like you got to train in the illusory body and remembering like, you know, this everything is just like a dream, not real. And so if you're listening to this, it's not impossible that someone might have the thought, almost like seems a little bit kind of weird, like when you say, oh, this whole world is just a dream, then it could sound a little bit like a religious idea, like almost like pushing this idea that like, well, okay, yeah, that's all fine and good, sort of prophylactic, but like it's not really a dream. I mean, a dream is a dream and I'm awake and this is actually happening in the world and so on and so forth, right? It's possible to think that. But saying like everything is a dream, it's not like saying a false reality, like trying to like sort of psychologically, like just like a mechanism to kind of work with how you perceive reality. It's kind of like we were talking earlier. So like all of these appearances, the way that we dream and the way that the dream phenomena arises, exactly the same state of like illusoriness in the waking state. Like it's the same, but for example, like in the Madhyamaka, in the like middle way path, like they talk about like how all these like are just imputations and labels. Like we have all these names and labels for something. And in the world, like each person with their own language and their own way, their own cultural kind of labels and so forth, will look at it and that's kind of like the context within which they perceive their reality. But it's really what it is this is a process of recognizing that just the way that our dream phenomena arises, in essence, it's the same nature. The illusory nature of it is the same, whether in the waking state or in the dream.
That's also. That is to call a shaya mambo do than a davja, teni mar the tornado da teni davjibate stonjam zigandua. Te watch the carriage Tomjam zeate dini tahni dogini mukuk. Tambo Kasante, Tambo de Lapson, the Sanjam Zeatani, Toxam Kugnine, Tenir Mukug, 양라오린 데나 당보니 언니들 드니 다디 물람거 무슨야가 탑시 남바 빈두가 나는 구르 당 예담당 특례 당데 영저 당 특례 범지 뜻소 피해고디 흔히 자와니 무쿠니네 드니 대초거 남도에 쪽니 자와니 흔히 무쿠비야 줘야 된다고 와치 중종아 요레지 템종나 가리시보레 다테리 동점제나
That's what I'm saying. And so the next one is known as the obstacle of like nothing, which really means, or like empty, which is an obstacle that means you can't fall asleep to begin with. Like you have trouble actually falling asleep in the first place. So earlier we were talking about the difficulty of easily awakening from a sleep state, but in this case, it's a little bit different, but in this case, it's like the first one, you recognize the dream and then you awake. But now in this one, it's you have trouble falling asleep at all because your mind is very active and your thoughts are proliferating. So when you're doing any of those 4 methods that we talked about as you're going to bed in order to recognize the dream, either visualizing like Guru Rinpoche or Yidam deity or the seed syllables or the tigle, the bindu at the throat chakra. And none of those are working in terms of you're not able to fall asleep. Like your mind is active. That's this type of obstacle.
Teni testa u nyokta shone na kare gore je senena da nyong na da je gona na nyong kirtane teni o thle na ko gomni ne tela da ba ta ni na nyong na la da de chu thok chi ba ro chi chang wa teni ten domba jamba ten chu te jama sam de ter chi kola tadni na teni te ni kuna teni ti dari ga tongjam den ro ma re jing da.
And so if you have this trouble, then what you visualize is you visualize in the center of your heart a dark, like a black colored bindu. And you just let your entire awareness focus on that black bindu in your heart, thinking of nothing else, just resting the mind in that dark colored black bindu. And then that will avert the obstacle of not being able to fall asleep in the first place.
Ni ta de cha kang gar ka na ka tu na de kha sang kong de yang sha de ta ti ngon do gar ka na sha yo re ta na kong star yang na ti ni chu sto de rang de de chi ni shu gyab ni na tim chu de ta ri ga gyulu ta na malam ta so la de zong ju chi de ni rang de de lama yin na yetam yin na kha ro yin na zam na lama yetam kha ro sam bo yin na 딱 소라 적답 담니는 대답 탐지 그더니 다 흥얼음 다디 점바를 다니 로파 피에톡 소르제한다고 대다가 팀주대 소라 적고 녀니는 답 대다시는 옛나 악치나랑 거더니 대 존주고 똑다나 니 치즈레디 측근은 더니 다 자학생 그 옵션랍 그 스톱거는 드니 되는 걸람 디셈버 겨르네 대 할리와 같이 보리 대 소라답나 와치 그거야 마고 떠가야 세트오리 드니 테스타고 고니 소라답 답아 적대다 치니 옛나 드니 휴그니니 드니 로카치 그래 가서 무치 야랑고나 무치 그 라과 인디 뭐 주고 타타요 벤지 그 라과존 야텐 코랑게 후기암나 야랑도도 와텐다고 치니는 로카치 뭐시 그래시
So we were talking last time during the discussion of the preliminary practices to this, that you should primarily, you have to do the work yourself, of course. You have to put in the effort and the diligence. And that means, during the course of the day-to-day life, waking state, you're training your mind in really seeing the illusory nature, the illusory body. This is like a dream. And there's like a diligence component. There's a perseverance. And so you're doing this work, you're putting in the effort. But in addition to that, there's also the component of supplicating the Lama and the Yidam deity, the Dakini, or all 3, Lama, Yidam, and Dakini, supplicating, praying for blessings, praying to the Lama, the Yidam, the Dakini, please grant your blessing. Please help me to recognize the dream. Please help me. Please grant your blessings to enable me. Through your blessings, with great faith and devotion, you pray. You pray to the 3 roots. And through that, through the blessings, then that's an additional force that will contribute to not only when you supplicate with faith and devotion, then it's like you have, on the one hand, the power of your own diligence and your own effort. On the other hand, you also have the power of the blessings of the three roots, refuge sources, and those two combined, then this will, through supplicating and praying, then you can avert and clear away any and all possible obstacles and pitfalls that could arise, and increase the power of the practice. And so for that, it's kind of like if you have to get up and off the ground, and you have to use all your own power to get yourself up, but you have somebody reaching as a strong man, giving you a hand and pulling you up, you get up that much more easily. So you have both this, you have your own diligence, you also have the blessings through supplicating and praying to the three roots.
Teni jugma tela teni ndenjam je achi yori ndezem na kare la gore mara jeddo ya da wotina li thong yong da wotina chi ko ga wa ndenjam je na teni inchi ji off da wotina chi ze ga do wotina chi la ko ga teni tenda chi du te chira ji na te nam jin nga zo ngon ro ga kam na lim tha lo pa je and chi yor wa lim tha lo tang bo ya re khu gyab ni ne teni kom chok sam la ta pa chi chu shen do yo tenda chi na teni lower de te when na tuk ngambala so batang tumugo skin kare na teni lower te yang chi tapa na mea lo ni teni te namjin te suina am jong gore nga chu bodna ma yena te da chi tambo chi la khu gyab ni yang teni mar yu ye she ya ga da wo tang teni shir ger go ma yena tambo chi na ba da o zoni ne chi nyamlen da o she sam ni ne te khu gyab na yang je khu chu kho yo maran khoru kare ro ga shin kan khoru me ra wa teni ma bo go teni namala so pa ma bo go chonyon ba chak son kare ta kare re te sichi ko mo zo ya chora zo go ndam da timu je na teni mar yu ni ne ta du samare samne te ra chu gra zo mo thab ni te da chak ro go wa te cho da shona ya te la war che te la changyen bo tem go re.
So the next one is like the obstacle of like slipping off or like wandering astray. And it's kind of like, it's like, for example, where you start out all gung-ho about the practice and, you know, really like ambitious, and you start out really strong and like you really want to do the practice. Like, for example, oh, you know, I really want to do Dharma and I'm really into this. And then somewhere in the middle, you kind of like, for whatever conditions arise, it could be, you know, a bad influence or somebody, you know, maybe leading you astray, and you just kind of like lose the impetus. You kind of almost like you just give up. Like there's a lot of cases like, you know, just starting really strong, really intense practice, really wanting to start out really good, and then somewhere in the middle just like losing that resolve and just giving up the Dharma or giving up the practice. In the West that happens. You know, you see a lot of cases like somebody in the beginning, they really are interested in Buddhism and they really put a lot of effort and energy into practicing, and then over time they, you know, for whatever reason they end up giving up the Buddhist path and taking a different path. And on the one hand, you can't blame the Westerners because you don't have a culture, a society that is like a support system for your practice really in the same way, let's say, as people from like other cultures, Eastern cultures. So like you might, you know, maybe a person in the West, they start out interested doing Dharma practice, and maybe their family or people are like kind of pressuring them, like saying, hey, what's going on with you? Have you gone crazy? Like you're doing all these things and nobody else does that. What are you doing? You know, and then that pressure and the people not able to hold their own, not able to stay strong in the face of, you know, people's talking or people's like persuasion, and like kind of losing their own resolve in the process. So that's an obstacle. And so we're going to talk about how to avert that kind of obstacle, the obstacle of like tapering off or slipping away from the practice.
Teni testa worship shona to anim bo so ta chi mala chi nya ya men do aten kari chi gore labna do teni song so ma te tanjur ni par kawan de gum gore nga chu te ta cheran chu tanjur ni par kawarang sik jam sha na lil hawo yori ta ya gumna te lil hawo yo mare cheran chu na tamjur ni ka sha yo sa ga teni do ya yo na re teni tanchu ya ma bo yo na re te ma chap ngondo tamche ka kabla teni lord do na ba shi ti te langola tab de o shi tri jora te chola ya bo ta ni na tamjur ni ka lam na kanda chi la lab kan du tar jana kare re jor jana kare re ni ka jana kare re re jin ben teni ya po ti ne de te rang la cha ti nga chu mulu go ran thang da o te ya po sa bo ji ha ko ya tezo teni te ha ko na teni ti to wa tamjur ni par ka te ni dio na te chi mast kwa yem ba ta ne teni nam tu ko shi chi la me pa do ya te da on cha mast pa gum Tini Korinum gum, Tendashina nothing today, Taran who got any that dear Unyura Taroship Irmanda Bochila, that Dambi Chu Lam Kama, Jamba Lam Kakangi, or Tokumandu Sam Yosaro Hakongre, in Tendachegore, Somoris.
So in this case, like, how do you avert this kind of an obstacle? And the answer is you again reflect on the difficulty of attaining and finding the freedoms and endowments of this human birth, this precious human body. So, for example, if we just like say the words, it's easy to say, but it's actually very difficult to really meditate on the difficulty of finding the freedoms and endowments of the human birth. There are so much literature, spiritual teachings written on this, whole sutras devoted to the difficulty of finding the precious freedoms and endowments of the human body, whole shastras, treatises of Dharma devoted to this topic of the difficulty of finding the human body. And in Mundro, you know, you have your 4 thoughts that turn the mind and the verses that easily summarize these points, but there are full on, like, you reflect, and every like aspect of that. The idea that this precious human body of freedoms and endowments, like, what is a freedom? What does that mean? What are these freedoms? And what are these endowments? And why is it so difficult to find? What does that really mean? Difficulty, like how difficult, that kind of thing. There's a lot on this. And so because when you really reflect and contemplate and meditate the difficulty of attaining the freedoms and the endowments that make up this human body, the precious human body, then you really like understand clearly. And then once you get to that point, then you move on to thinking, well, okay, even though I have found this very difficult to find body of freedoms and endowments, it doesn't last very long. It's impermanent. And this way we reflect on the impermanent nature of life and the reality of mortality and death. So death and impermanence, right? And then after that, you go to thinking about samsara as a whole, the cycle of conditioned existence being by essence flawed, the nature of suffering. And then as and when you really deepen your thinking and reflect in this way, then you come to recognize that, okay, well, the singular medicine that can heal this suffering and sickness, the only path, the only real remedy is the Dharma path, the precious Dharma. And aside from that, there's nothing else that can kind of save or rescue me from this suffering. And then that's how the obstacle of kind of losing one's resolve, that's how you avert that.
So teni ta tamjurni perkawa ina chemartawa nanda so ko ina tambo te para ngachu shisha chigre jangra teni janni teni rang mache tola the circo din myamnyo dan teni tenda shini kareze goreta ranglang o ta tamjurni perkawa nuni toni re samni koanda myamnyo ra uchteria nangla yori ta te go yori ma to rang teni yigena la o par te kuntina la te jiore tinala te jio tenda dali hawo yori tenda jata gore ina semko tola chale ngoma rendu samya tamjur martawata tamjur ne perkawa rendu samya che martawata ngoma rendu samya ju tevla ta murgo rang semgna ni chur kharianda o tenda ju zoja top gore ta to ni lu to ni ta karila gore tenda ju na teni ta nuba thong gore ta tesi
No, sorry, and so so the difficulty of attaining the precious human body of freedoms and endowments and the reality of death and impermanence, all of these are things to be known, things to learn, right? Concepts in one way. So it's easy to kind of have a theoretical understanding, but when you actually meditate on this and reflect on this, then you develop an experiential understanding. In your life, you begin to have these sort of epiphanies where you say, oh, okay, this is really what it means. And there's a deep understanding that arises in your mind. And that is really like through your understanding, you experience it. You experience that reality, and that understanding is something more than just being able to regurgitate what you read in a book and say, oh yeah, in this text it says about this, and in this textbook it says this. Anybody can do that. That's easy to, recite and repeat the sort of theoretical aspects or definitions, but to actually be able to have that deep understanding arise in your mind of that nature. That's what arises. And when that arises, when you have it in your own life, from your own mind, the dawning of a true understanding of this, then that's where the power and the sort of like the juju comes.
Tini chigla karizina testa utamjur ni par kawanda yobo gomna ina tini ni mambo to samsung tini muni ta kanda yin higame ina ngarang go samsung yin when an American la samlo tanda mambo ne tini semna la merki baga semka na mambo yori te shaya chiwa mari tini te tanda ya merki baga ma tsani rang tini ka ta rame zegara nga so tenra chenga yang pe mambo yogo yori nde kare semga na nde kare go yori jina nde tamjur ni par kawanda onde yako porda sona tsawani tini di depression da wote chaga mare samga duk sigri ni re chemer tak ba te ha ko sona tini te rang so ya da wota ne tini yam chiga mer jang jan chiki ba da thambo meni tini chiga nyuda da ma da zo ya namjuni jer da lan do ya tena ga skor mchendi na lan go ta ni tuni pe phandok ma omjong gre samga yota ne ta yenda ya te nyamlin she gore ma rang tena chi sha jagya jam tan to mi si da ka sta tan de zo hali wa ka chembo chiga dugunda chiga maung pa chigla chi zega yo mara ta da ni phantok re zera.
That's what I'm saying. And so meditating on the difficulty of finding the freedoms and endowments, the way I think of it, and this is just like my personal thoughts on it, is that in the US, in America, it seems like there's a lot of people suffering from depression and various forms of like afflictions of the mind, of the emotions. And not only depression, but the suicide rate is very high here in the US, in America. And so I always think like it would be especially important for Americans to have more focus on understanding how difficult it is to find the human rebirth of freedoms and endowments. That I think that would be very good, not only in terms of sort of addressing and remedying like depression and suicidal ideation and all of that, but also even in terms of like the moment, like not getting so lost in, you know, like the dramas and the conflicts that we go through, you know, and getting involved in all these, you know, disagreements and fighting and so forth, because that will sort of like put things in perspective. So not only is it going to benefit in the future, but it benefits like right now in the present as well.
Tunita njugna cheredi tsikana shirna rang te tan di desta unyamlen te sheping ir kamna te la yichi da go go du ta ndi shawan dab nam ju ndam jong yin sam yichi de go go du tani te tan teni dam ngazin na ta lama da uji chidni na teni te la ya Japan da uyong kan teni komel no me da tenda mayang kan Japan da uyong kan tenda go go du ma to rang teni Transitional na ya teni computer ka to kalando ni rang chi jang ni na teni te tenda chini chi nyang je dam ga da me na na teni phan to mari tanga chu bogo sha ta na tenda sha ka yore dino a tenda ti yore tumu yin ti te lama ga dam ga gore teni rang go stondu gore muku gore ta tenda shine na te malam bar don de ngi par te tenda shine malam de muzo gore teni ngalam thama dan ra bo muzo zen sona teni bar dur kabna ngi par de war do muzo gore ko na ne chuni war do da spa war do kan gor kabla thama chiglar malam thama dan la muzo sona teni war do de muzo gore bar do de muzo sona teni da teni te bar dur ka dungar thamcho me par chakare ne teni te hali wa kar chimo chade yores.
That's what I'm saying. And so you have to also be able to have trust and really be able to believe that if you do this practice, that you will achieve the result. And so that means having the direct oral instructions, the upadesha from a lama. That means a lama who has the lineage, not just any, you know, Tom, Dick, Harry that doesn't have any lineage and doesn't have any transmissions, just, you know, and that also doesn't mean going and surfing the internet and going on the computer and trying to glean this sort of wisdom through that method, because that's not going to deliver. It has to be through the oral instructions, through the direct lineage holding instructions. And then through that, so not only through, and so in Tibetan culture, in our tradition, we say like, it's very important that you have the line of instructions from the lama, from the masters with the lineage. And then also, so you have that plus your own diligence, your own, you know, effort and hard work combined with your devotion in the lama, faith and devotion. And then you will be able to practice in the dream bardo. And after having recognized the dream 7 times, it is said that you will recognize when you're in the pardo as well.
And that means the pardo of dharmata, the pardo of becoming. So after death, when you're in the pardo state at death, then if you've recognized the dream 7 times, you'll be equipped to recognize the pardo when you're in the actual pardo after death as well.
Nita tartai tsukune tani ta karcheshu ngomati tivju tani ta te lawen patani tampo malam muzin warter malam tani turjurshi tamar malam meper zoyate kariji jinane tani tate ta ugoni malam muzin du charon tani malam oxer jinana ta khasan tevsha so tani te ni dowi kavla tani ta rupa de kanji ngong nyong ga la kanji ngong do re je so ti thaso te Trua Gangola, Margalam Gangola, Mando, Yarni, Mobdat, Tini Semaxar Gungorte, Muzini, Tatan, that Duate, Tarmalam Oxer Zegatuate, Titoland Gori, Daron, Tini Rambatam, which is Farna Tini, and some la Shabja Chimbo with Tini Rupazigona and Jiguri, and some la Doba Chimbo, Rupazina and Jiguri. Not only Zena and Jiguri, Telamon Draman of Tower, Constar Candini, Nukerkavla, Ting Muzini, Tito, Nukerkavla, Tini Mulam Oxer on Duyaga.
That's what I mentioned that. And so the most important thing is this last and third stage in the dream yoga practice. Remember, we talked about the 3 major stages or phases of the practice. And the first one is the recognition phase, recognizing when you're in the dream. And the second is being able to alter and change the dream, like through multiplication, proliferation, transformation. But the third stage and this final stage is the stage of no more dreaming. And that is what we were talking earlier, like the clear light, the luminosity of the dream. And we talked about how what happens when you're falling asleep is the awareness, the rikpa. It enters into the subtle substratum consciousness, which we call the alaya, or the expanse, the nature of the all ground, the storehouse consciousness. And in that very subtle moment, then there is no proliferation of the confused projections, but it's also not a state of complete unconsciousness either, like having fainted. If you can place your awareness there, there's a clarity, and resting the mind in that state of clarity. That is so you start in the first phase, and we talk about, like in Mahamudra, you call it Rikpa. That's the same thing. Or in Dzogpa Khenpo, great perfection, Rikpa means a pure awareness or emptiness. Many names for this, but it is in essence when you are falling asleep, ultimately as your awareness being in that state of clarity, when your awareness, when your consciousness withdrawn back into the alaya, into the all ground consciousness, and in that subtle awareness, resting in that clarity, that is the clear light. And when you're able to rest in that clarity, there is no dream from that point. You're just absorbed, remaining and resting in that nature.
Tariga oxels chupshaya yorita na constar kan dugu ta nga chutini shog wosam gartawa kangum chudana te gum te dapshine na tini tata gar malam gar kamna te muzim batang ne tini kat tini te thamakashi muzim ni te la ta te sem gironjin raw yang yori te la muzim nyamyo kina chiwi nirkamna teni ta kharsanga chungmati themrum chakapshat teni de doze dua nomche thosum ja jushaya yo tip jumi jila na tim tude te ri osar je ki tamara kharongre je ri osar je ya te semchen thamche la khar ke yore je kang ka tu yina when nan chiwi nirkamna stokchape nirkamna ri osar ke thola thamari re ma dogo yo sari teni zoching go jong tavla na ri osar tenen germana ga chumbo yan chala yan char ge re je ma cha ke semchen thamche lan char ke yore yina darta de la komdi ma shina teni temma banan charda ya teni skandar yugi tam haliwati cho thong la kharni ne teni me par charo teni on khora mar korea ga ngop chungni ya teni khodo re phan to yo yo mare teni tada tela malam ga kap se nyamlen shina chendela ya teni te shog do goksam ga tawa nyamlen shina teni chiwi nirkamna rangjing ga de ji osar ga kharu nirkamna teni tarta nga chu osar gomyate ta ma di tari ga u osar jegara teni ji osar khati te ma ga osar je teni Tita sona tini TV oxar the mag oxar motion in it, tini trodoya, sargero, teraga catch of sharp yori. Tigim sang which is maladi pandasona wina and chua shot in number social java in the tera yor about this or tezi yori, tini teta ugoniam shigore, tatera song or the age, tini tere.
Rumachela Tanadi Zokshengi di Jakpanangla, di Chichi Song at DJ Gokchane. This way, but Anganzo Simchan Tamchela, the she was a disha younger is in a me monk cheshire the Monzi Machene that yeah, Drogaris, Tenikova Cordogaris, the Jakpanangi Chichi Song, Yanti
Gokchane. When in the Joktional and data, the Bardo come and data song in Jerma, Stan Jermag and Nong Tumbuyan Chella.
Okay.
Semjon Tamchala Gio Sercaria Yuri, Menkan Chukyo yo marriage. The Jumsang Tata Tinyam Shina Mambana Harkri, Titaso Shigris.
So for recognizing, there's actually a lot further teaching that can be had on the clear light, the luminosity, and abiding in that. But in any case, whatever your recognition is of the view through Mahamudra, Dzogpa Khenpo, or Madhyamika, middle wave, meditate, absorb, rest in that nature, in that moment. And then when you're in the dream state and you're able to recognize the dream, you become familiar with the nature of mind. You gain experiential awareness of your own nature, mind's nature. And what happens is that when you actually are faced with the state of dying, we talked about the many different stages of dissolution in the dying process and how there's the inner dissolution called Nangche Topsum, which is where you have the white light shining of the bindu going down, and then the red light shining bindu going up, and then these close together, and the consciousness is kind of some like clasped between or trapped between, and then in that moment you fall unconscious, and then there's a moment where these open, and at that very subtle moment there's known as the ground clear light or ground luminosity, the luminosity of the basic ground of truth. And that ground luminosity will shine forth for everyone. Every single sentient being has a moment, a glimpse of the absolute nature of the ground of clear light. And in that subtle moment, and in the Dzogpa Khenpo Tantras, it says, even the smallest microbial insect that is in the thinnest blade of grass, when they die too, they have the ground luminosity that will dawn, the dawning of the luminosity of the all ground, the true nature. But what happens is most sentient beings, because they have not familiarized themselves and introduced to that nature, then even though they have that subtle moment of the shining of the original ground clear light nature, they miss it. They don't recognize it. Not recognizing it, then it passes very quickly. And then all the appearances of the samsara, the cycle of existence, will arise, and they get cycling in samsara. So for most people, even though for every single sentient being, they will have that moment when they die, that the shining of the clear light of the ground will arise. But most of them won't recognize it, and it passes very, very quickly. Like very, very swiftly, it doesn't last very long duration. But for those who have practiced the Mahamudra, Dzogpa Khenpo, middle way teachings, recognition, when you have the arising of the clear light of the ground, what you're doing when you're practicing that's called the baby clear light, the child clear light. And then when you die and you have this moment of the shining of the clear light, the luminosity of the ground, that's the mother luminosity, mother awareness and baby awareness meeting together, like reuniting mother and child. And that is liberation. And that moment, because then you recognize, oh, this is what I practiced during my life. You recognize that same clear light shining forth, the awareness. So the mother luminosity, mother clear light, and then mother and child, which is what you've been practicing your life, they come together, united. And that moment is liberation. And so if you do the dream yoga practice, then at the time of death, you're more likely to recognize it.
Well, that's so. Teni tate tawari tate da chini teni malam gernam jurka kap susha jinjamlen tamche tabna an tambore teni tenda shini nyamlen shini ne tenga susha je teni tenda china teni ta yabo haliware te kat tenda chujin da matamna tapsi dil habo kare che ayorizina nyal rambi nirkabna tani de ta ni kugi nirkabna shachum shot semke ni nyal yan de arang tani dari semjen tamjala pantokwal kyuchuk samgyo dana tini rang nyalni nga chu lubon dala ina tini pantokora ba manyana nga chu tini nit makuna nga chu tini jik tenga man duk thok marwa tini de tertri tini nga nit yer sarna tini yang semjen tamjala pamba ga tini ton drub yen samni ne shangship jok de semke ni par ni jirna am chan ka ok shangship jok de semke ya ko chon ro de tenra son ore tenna tenra shina ge samgi mo chapa mjongre to
So in this way, if you're able to do the dream yoga in the way that has been explained and really through your practice and experience, that's number one, that's the best. But even if you're not able to do all these practices, most important is when you're falling asleep, right before you go to sleep, set your intention and your aspiration that give rise to bodhicitta, the supreme bodhicitta, great compassion, motivation, and then let yourself fall asleep with that as your last resolve and intent, because then that will set the tone for the entire sleeping state. You'll be like a continuous, like sort of saturated by or set by the motivation of bodhicitta, and the benefit of that will be inconceivable. So that, like, if you give rise, may I be of benefit to all sentient beings, may I benefit the sentient beings, and that is your last intent. You set the intent, set the tone, then even while you're sleeping, you're continuing to generate bodhicitta. So that's the merit and the benefit, inconceivable benefit of giving rise to bodhicitta right before going to sleep.
Ki Malambardo Korla Tani ta TLC Kotsongala Tani Shadow Kiji Tini Young Chorang Kajirsha Tena Roya Chini Tini Karta Yangatani Juktersoares Tini Charansoya Mambo Lebson Tini Tamchila there's a Pantoya Rivayo Tini Jima Tawanda Tendayona Narani Pola Tredan Digade Tini tini jawat sola tini langyam ni ruqashe ala aliwar gawo tini chenam pheba tujeche tini TLC kozo ina korkam nawa tujeche tini nga chu tela jangnan jigre tini jawat sola ngo chomna ma to ya ti choma mo manduk je gwa
No sorry Mochila. So anyway, this has been this teaching on the dream bardo was requested by TLC, and they asked me to do this teaching series on the dream bardo teaching, and we have the translator, everybody to do this, and so many of you have come for these teachings, so I hope it's been of benefit, and I just want to welcome you all. If you have any further questions outside of this teaching later on, you can always ask us, and we're there to to the best of our knowledge to answer the questions. So I want to thank everyone for coming and being a part of this, and also thank TLC and everyone for making this possible. So because we want to make sure we save enough time for people to ask their questions, we can end here.
Thank you very much. There are several questions. The first is, the basic instruction was to focus on a bindu in the throat chakra. What are the advantages of the throat chakra rather than the other chakras mentioned later?
Kinsoela mixukane tene jimbigi korlola semte goegi nenka prabo tene gyunsenda khare yeres pana remochegi jemada nganza tene ningi ta korlo dabo chila ripatene ya ta mixegi tene goba yore soya dabo ta nganza chik mixukane nilam gi kapso jimbigi korlola ripate goegi gyunsenda khare res
o te kharchang ngama tene chutu ngama kabla ta yori te shaji te teramare ti shirda nga wakawla da shadori kare jinan dijidwa ndi nga cho nit kubi nirkamna tambo number kipa par gyatso sa ro te nyong no la ire sitenda songja teni nyong no ni ne da ji gongji number kipi toni ne teni yor long number kipa long ta la joni tsurum jamba yonga te khora chi tambo gon rolam da cherde yori teni tsurum jamba he nirkamna tambo ko na sani on dog mari shirtsugi on dog mari jamba har chi yongre je te je kana na te shed te yongni ne teni ti thasona te jamba ni muze ya lamsang chi Chito Shinin, the Rotonda was in Nirkabnam Drumba that Goya and that don't sondwa.
So yeah, so this we actually taught during the May class about the reason for specifically focusing the mind's attention and the throat chakra. We didn't talk about it this class, but last class we did. But basically, when you're falling asleep, what happens is the consciousness is drawn inward and the consciousness is drawn into the heart chakra. And in the heart chakra, it is withdrawn into the alaya, the basic all-ground consciousness, and that's where you have the experience of the unconsciousness of falling asleep. But then, right before the dreams begin to proliferate, then when the consciousness sort of like stirs by riding the steed or the horse of the wind or the prana, and that's where from the heart chakra, where it's been absorbed into the all ground, then riding on the like sort of the steed of the prana, the consciousness goes up to the throat chakra. That's the first place that it goes before it then circles throughout the nadis and kind of travels around the subtle channels. Is that the first place it goes is to the heart chakra. So you're sort of like catching it right before it, begins its journey through the circumnavigating through the subtle channels. It's always going to go there. In the tantras, it all states, when you fall asleep, the consciousness absorbed into the all ground consciousness in the heart chakra, and from there stirs with the wind, the prana, and then goes up to the heart chakra. That's why you want to focus there as the starting point for your dream yoga practice, right when you're falling asleep. That's the reason.
This is similar to an answer this is about, I think, referring to an answer that Khenpo's already given, but I want to read it. After the second teaching for 2 weeks, I was able to be quite aware of the illusory body and my dreams were clearer. But then the effect of the teachings faded and forgetfulness settled. I have tried to come back to it, but with so much resistance. What can I do?
The nilam gi nanjar gi da nyamlan de gulu da rabodin de jang de ne da so nilam dan za yang chiso da dam minda den de mang bodin de thoya rabodin de go su yare sa ken sa bodan dikide yang remochi gi di jam kor sun ba o da khali chene chi ko je du gi yare da ya tampo ko shuk rabo ya kene ne chi khazore nilam dan za chi ko ripate ne nilam de jaya gi de ne samlo ra shuk chmo yong gore de ne je la yang khali khangsan chi la yang je ne ya 남긴 나진 체네 니람도 통용기도 가르치는 작사레서 줄리기 체나다 퍼체 rumbo치기 렌니 견사 인사레서 디 좋아디 이네요 지양까지
리리데 다가 걸다장가 질란다 야셔오리다 다녀지데 여고레도 셔탄당uni 여고레데 텐레치나 다레와 요바 딱고 말와 레와 요바 딱레 옛나 다 바르체담 종거리 ngo마리 데니 다드니 데랑드니 데 와르체다 오지역 송도가 데니 젠점 춘점 동점 젠점 가리엔나 데 저거 콜라트무 바르천 존에나 가리체고리지나 직더데 길루가 돌아 다른 후기압니 길루 고미야 데니 니나 치즈리지 이제나 속삭바다 드바장야 데니 자왁섬 데니라 소라타야 더조시나테 와르체테 세르크요레 데레 데니 yang malam tere chona lopam da umjoni sembar kyoni ha tape mese to khari son samni ne tere yang chayo mare kadin malam muzini tere chona yang tela chi haliwa ta jemba chemboskini tape ndhu samni gaya da tere yang jero shenyang mundu mar shugyamni sha de drug go ndu te garduk to so par yugja go ndu samche tere chigrela
no, it's a good question, and it means that there's real like hope for increasing. It's a sign, it's good. The thing is of course you're going to have obstacles. I mean, obstacles happen, they will definitely come, but we talked about the 4 major types of obstacles just earlier, and there's the obstacle of like easily waking up, the obstacle of falling asleep, forgetfulness, or kind of losing that continuity. There's the obstacle of not being able to fall asleep at all, and then there's the obstacle of kind of like losing the resolve or slipping away from the practice and so forth. And so whatever the obstacle is, the first thing you can do is reinvigorate your day practice of meditating on the illusoriness of this body and the illusory body practice. Like just reinvigorate that, just focus more on that during the day. This is a dream, and just keeping that practice going. Second thing is infuse your practice to increase purifying of obscurations and gathering of accumulations of merit and wisdom. So like do more merit practice, merit accumulations, purification practices. That always helps. Supplicate the 3 roots of the sources of refuge. These are all going to dispel any obstacles you may be experiencing. But the thing is when you do have obstacles, you do have, let's say, like something like what seems to be an unfavorable outcome or whatever, the important thing is not to get discouraged, not to feel like, oh man, this is just so bad. There's no hope for me. I can't do this. No, don't let your mind get into that discouragement or feel demoralized at all. You just want to keep going. And similarly, on the other side of things, the other extreme is like if you do have luck and you're able to recognize the dream, don't get so attached to that either. Don't, think like, oh, wow, I'm great. Oh, this is wonderful. And like kind of just get too like excited and too attached. So you want either extreme, you don't want to get discouraged and disillusioned and then you beat yourself up over it and feel hopeless. Also, you don't want to get too attached and grasp onto it where you start to like, oh yeah, I'm grasping, I'm recognizing my dreams. So like kind of neither extreme of excitation and depression, neither extreme.
Any agent, the new thing, the Shasamoda Tambajesha, the Bardo took Gavlan, the Bardo took Satsik down it, the Ni Vartum Chantur Molam, Terni Boyore, the the Bardo took Satsila, the Machik down them, Chantur Molam, the Machik Dama to Yomari. The Inji Tokala, Jurjori, do Inji Tokala Yosare, Tien Donna. Live option love Chemboyore, and the young option love Gonika Shayari, Tapa Janindona, Teni Ranger Gilla, Munishana Kiongre, Munishana Tangi, Shokchini Shala, Samotanam, Tani Ripagan, Road of North in the Taripi Lamni, the Kajashan in the Teni, Tenda Chushaka Yora, young Shokchini, Samotana, Tini, Tapa Janine, Timbardo to Static, Tawadum, Chotor Molambia, Bondon, Sora Tamni, Tenda Shiniba, the Kiongre, Tashi Mango, Tenda Shini, Soraya, Tabni, the Kena, Tapa. That's what
I'm going to say that. Another thing is, I wanted to, this reminds me because I wanted to say this, I forgot. So at the end of the Pardo, the 6 Pardo text teachings, there's a root text, the root verses of prayer of the recognizing the 6 Pardos. And there's a Bardo prayer, a prayer for the realization of the Bardos. And there's one page, like the verses, like the root words are only a page long. And then same with the Bardo prayer, it's only 1 page. So it's pretty short. And I believe it's in English now too. So if you can read these prayers with faith and devotion and pray, this is alone just the path of the blessing. So we've been talking from the path of like the definitive, like through learning the methods and applying the methods. But there's another path, which is the path of blessings through entirely devotion and faith path. And that's another way to ensure that you will recognize the Bardo, the dream. So for example, if you just have your faith and you do these prayers, you recite this root verses prayer and the Bardo prayer with faith and devotion, eventually you will recognize the dreams. So that's another thing to remember.
Next. I found that I cannot recognize dreams on work days, but can often during vacations. Is there any remedy or practice that we can do during busy work days so that those nights are not wasted?
Tate yo tata ya bardo tuk statsik down it ni bardo molam randun yarmar te mar lows on in it ni bardo tuk statsik bardo chorur molam da tendandun tenda chinin tata shaya da tete anyembo da redua ni ta ticho yo mari nyamlin shaya ticho mena ta tendo ya la ticho di rambon rogo modua ni te lows on jana moja tanjur dona don jana digara tenda chinin don ni te sorap tamna Tenin Jungre to Koto Tapaya, Soraya Tamna Surgeon, the Pardo Tukan and Yamin Tenis Julaski Hungry, the Malambardo Shizia, Mari Parto Tukan, that was actually younger or Koto Teni Taranga Teni Semji Nilu Moshia or Tenda Rate Shehungrezia, Mapumadua.
That's what I'm saying. Oh, well, that question is answered by what I was just saying, like, if you recite the prayers, like just those short root verses and the prayer for liberating from the confusion of the bardo, that bardo aspiration prayer, those don't take a lot of time. And, you know, on the busy work days, you don't have time necessarily to go through all of these sort of phases of the practice. But if you just, with faith, you have good faith and you have prayer and you supplicate, you can do that at any time. Even while you're driving, you could be praying and with faith. And that's another way to kind of help to kind of apply this. And another thing is that it's talking about a prayer to recognize the 6 bardos. The dream bardo is one bardo among these 6 bardos, but all of them are encompassed in this prayer because it's all about recognizing the true nature of mind. So if you do that, then that's also a benefit, just, you know, praying and supplicating with faith.
Several times a night during the sleep cycle, the mind transitions from dream to a deep, dreamless sleep. My question is, how can we carry the clarity of dream recognition into that deep, dreamless sleep state rather than just falling into unconsciousness? I believe the practice is called Odsal, clear light.
Oh.
그래서
Tezi jirta.
tanda di samsamla nilam nyugere samsamla nilam me pegi koni tuk jane petta kora ta nilam me yogore sa ine anda nganso nilam me yonde ta nganso ni tuk jane ta ni tuk porang ji ta ge ta chisare ta ge soma sa rabo dende daw shi maimba nganansa gi penar mo chiki de ose sigi mare besa di khase gire so di tene di nang lola pena nganso nilam ngunzen che di kangla di rikpa ngunzen che kengi ta rikpa yorwa so di Ripadi gun toya ki tapshe kandere gos kaisana samsamla nilam ni tsasana tini ni kubo na la shor dogo yorwasa tini nilam de chola dogo yorwas kaisana nilam mare ni de chola dogo yorwas ta ni ku jane ta mare ba ki timu gi rajen yorwasa
Shunandere malam oxar tenguzen ya ga tapshira bola tini nyal ni nilrambe nirkamna sem de nyong na la yike arkar po gomni ne tini sem Salo tela tadine deya tenda chigre yena tela tarong tapshi manga goyore te tambo jani te korala ya tini ta chiga gyurjum mambo chigore te tendi teranga jusha ya tipjuk te momtata yore tini kantar kya te jusha samso tani yena titso tsaga ni dang mundu ne tini te dang mundu tini ta kare chigore je nanga to tada timchu te di shirgya chembo da zoba chembo la sopa ga chi tawa te chola komnyong da yo na nya rambi dir kapna tela ti no la jani marani sona malam oxer ka ngon dogore tenda chi taranga la ko amena teni nya rambi nir kapna sem go teni nyong no la ne yike arkar poksar po chi la nam shikta na kale malam oxer chong gore ze tenda sum do wa
Nazar mojela yeah, so to be able to recognize the clear light, the wasel, the luminosity of the dream, when you're falling asleep, one thing you could do is let your awareness rest at your heart center at a white syllable ah. Actually, I was going to explain this. It's the text that I have it was out later on in the text, and so we didn't get to cover it because we didn't have enough time. But that's one skillful method for being able to awaken the clear light of the dream within the dream is that as you're falling asleep, just let your awareness rest at this white colored ah at your heart. But there's many more like stages that come here for this. I didn't get a chance to teach on it. Or if you have experience doing Mahamudra practice or Dzogpa Khenpo practice, the view, if you can just be in the view of the Mahamudra, the view of Dzogpa Khenpo, whatever you practices, and meditate in that state as you're falling asleep. This also helps to recognize the clear light in the dream. If you don't have any exposure to the view of the Dzogpa Khenpo or the Mahamudra, then that's when you would visualize like the white syllable ah at the heart and let your awareness just rest in that state as you fall asleep. And that will help you to ascertain the clear light in the dream, the osel, luminosity.
Becoming lucid when I first fall asleep is very hard. If I try in the middle of the night, it's much easier. And then in the morning, it's easy to have very, very short dreams when I am lucid. In each case, I find looking directly ahead is easiest, staring into the dreamscape as it arises. How important is it to focus on the throat?
tanadi chidandi ko ni maku ni kudo chisu chidigasu ta chik rikpa sebo chene chisu gore ta rikpa no bodan sebo rabo tene dea tes khabo dos tene ni ku chasona tene so munzen che chasona tene chik rikpa sebo yoya tes le higher tene khabo de shoke torang de ta 토랑이 니람도 디 니람 투보투 가서 퉁퉁퉁퉁 된데 균 퉁퉁라고 된서 나라 망보샤 용겨레스 이네 아다 치단 니쿠 렌디 갑스스 디 짜코든서라 리파테야 디 테치 모랄라다 테스 카보두사 딜레 레라야 디 카레여레스나 디 듄기 남카 다 페나 치 리파디코 다 듄라코 카툭 텐데 테 드야 디 텐데로 테 용디 점발라 페나 니람기 가서다 니람기 남카라고 chigla ko ripatene tenero chigla ni kusona tes kondola tes le higher la yare tade jimbe kholo la ripate di tes khale higher sigar
tati te manjo te shirnam jimbe kholo la tati be go ter malam gar nam jurte muze ya chetre jimat gar malam ya wa muzen ni teni malam oxar la tapi ni kamna teni te go yo mare teni malam shina me par zo kora malam me pa zo ni malam oxar zo kore ti malam ganjik ten chigla ndung ya marwa teni me par zo kore teni parche ko te da chig ze yo yinjere go nyamlen da bo yina ta khundunji nam kajina marjina kuchig chigde ti oxar ko sem oxar ko ngong la jarni na parani kuya na te da gar ka cha chigena komta jo shirja chembo gom zoba chembo gom goma chembo gom ni ti tawa ga ngani ni krukson ya da oze ta to chi ba lo chigman de te dai na haliwa ye gore teni ti nirkamna tin chude tar malam me pater malam churgirte kar cheba yo mare teni malam oxar te muzeni par malam me par ngong zo te kar chebo chate yo wa
that's very much so the whole reason we focus the awareness on the throat chakra in the context of dream yoga practice is to enable us to become lucid in the dream and to recognize the dream. But ultimately, the goal is to recognize the luminosity and the clear light nature and to be able to let the mind rest in that luminosity state, because then there's no more dream phenomena because you're just in this continuum of the awareness of luminosity. And so because you can't always, like we don't just, the point is not to just remain forever in the dream world. We want to get beyond the dream into the clear light. That's the ultimate goal. So if you're able to already do that and have that lucidity, that luminosity awareness as you're falling asleep, I think that's what you're saying, is that like, whether it's the Mahamudra or the Dzogpa Khenpo or the middle way, just letting the mind be in that view, in that nature, and then being able to sustain that nature throughout the dream, sustain that lucid awareness, that is more important than being able to, change form in the dream or proliferate in the dream. If you can just sustain the clear light, then that's even like sustain that lucid awareness. That's the most important thing. And you can call it like putting the awareness up like in front in the sky, in the space, but however you call it, that's really what I think you're describing as just sustaining that luminosity, that lucid awareness. And that's more important than being able to, do any of these tricks in the dream.
I have heard the dream bardo described as the luminosity of the bardo, and I have heard the Shunya bardo described as luminous, as when the child luminosity meets the mother luminosity. Is this referring to actual light, or is it referring to a state of understanding, a realization of reality?
Tandati nganzo kita injila masona nganzo osel wasana samsam la clear light segre, samsam la luminosity segre, mashida ta tanya mamboyarwa. The counter what fell saying the pen of Loki or Drabochi or Drabo than the that Sonang Drabochi your best and my Sawa and Buyo Sawa Drabota my Buira Passage here was the was saying the Pedro Ped on Peton Drabochi Regi Munigita was and that she call what Drabot and the Yupiki Ketcha Drabochi your best and once again that sickens on the whole secure what?
Yagurida, Haliwa Kacha Yagurira, that thing you shall go na Yagujita Lion Shigamandutan, the Uchegi. Tamarka muka chorka muka wambu show your tikru ot salwa temare Tievre samguming, the Tiere samgume, Carizina te sure Muku show your teacher you otan, Amchoko your teacher you data, to Muzio Mare. Yina Shirtan Chicariza Bore, Semra or Mugdere, Zimni dead na Semdor Doda or Mayamba, to more Doda or Sada or Mayamba, Koranjik Tamoda or Turada, which around Jendi Marto, Semzia de Carizina. Nima down the Tini Dawa down the local water when the Mushigo show your teacher or Chita Mari. Yena Tini Yanchi Mubo the Peda, which is Shana, Doda, Peshana, and Dukumandu, Sanda or Domanda, or Teta, Hoshana and Dukumandu, Chigo Otan, the Tamada or Namkanda, Hoshana and Dukudu, a Tetam Jila Pogo, your age.
That's very much. So yeah, this is a really good question. So I don't really know that I should be the one to answer it necessarily, but one thing I'll say is what it's not. It's not like visual light that is an object of the eye, like the organ of the eye, the visual light that we think of in, just like we can see light through our eye. Nor, it's kind of like sound that you hear through the organ of the ear or light that you perceive through the organ of the eye. It's not like that kind of light. What it means is it's the mind. If you close your eyes, there's this there's this field arena, so to speak, that is like this. It's lit up, so to speak. It's aware. There's a vividness, and it's not like a rock or a clump of earth. It's just like sitting there, not moving, stagnant or static. There's this sort of like vividness, and it's kind of like, and at the same time, it's not saying like light, like just from the sun or from the moon. At the same time, not like a stone or a rock or a piece of solid concrete, that kind of earth. What it is, it's more like the sky. It's like this space that is also vivid. There's a presence, like it's very hard to find the words for that because it's like ineffable and inexpressible and beyond conceptualization. So it's hard to express.
Okay. Dreams early on in the morning are influenced by the few hours before sleep. The first dreams are the normal, indescribable, strange stories. But in the morning, if I had watched an action movie, I get an action dream with the same theme as the movie. Why are the first dreams so wild and the last dreams quite predictable?
Khenpo shujere se yan damanda den de tongore se tenia shoke rabochi ko tatsengi thama rabota de thorangi ta dun rabochi ki kapso nilam danso pana sosogi lonyen rabochi raboten de chi demo rabochi tebe yimbina lonyen na la yebigi demo danso ta ko simgi namshe dilaya ko shayungire simgi namkhala shayungire sta soso nilam danso kharichine shoke ginyalamda gomo ngabo ginyalamdanzo mandraogi gyunsen khares kaka yube gyunsen de khares samsamla soso chik tongja koja chik goyu dan digide yang konyalam na sha yongyeres and samsamla tongmanyoya daboda darminda de sha yongyeres khares di gyunsen
Shirda ngurna me atan dungjuk me patya malam khorang chanyit da wara.
Well, first of all, it's kind of the very nature of dreams to be like really random and kind of unpredictable in the first place. It's like the whole definition of a dream usually, like out of order and like no beginning, no end, no real rhyme or reason, kind of just random, kind of out of order.
Chignataria, Nichirezi chicken, Chungunium, Namjor Lapton, Tendashina, Chicken and Jura Tiptoda, Chipio injury. I think good Malamoni in Jura Temnan, Jura, Kanda Tipcha, then the Yomari, Kensaro Ramada Yon in Jura Tipuri, Chichinat is malam gnam jurla chonni ne tini jura thepto che ingirete ni tomba yenna manang ya ko mara sutra de sena tini ka tomba maina tini malam ramada tini cha dungdu me pangya khorang garam jita techik marbe.
And then as far as like changing of the dream nature, well, it could be maybe that you're starting to see, because you are going to see a change of some sort when you start doing the dream yoga practice. And it's, I don't know who asked this question, so I can't say for sure. If you have been doing the dream yoga practice and you're noticing some sort of differentiation in the dreams, well, part of it could just be when you're doing the practice, you're going to see change in the nature of the dreams. They might more dreams, something like that. But if you're not doing the dream yoga practice, another answer to that same question is that random kind of quality of dreams is just a very fundamental character of the dream. It's just unpredictable. It's kind of like disorganized, that kind of thing.
When I try to do something, when I am lucid in a dream, if my subconscious doesn't want me to do it, the dream gets reset and I get another chance to do it again. This can happen over and over. It's like I am being led somewhere, but I have to guess where. Is this important or is this mundane?
Okay. Tanda di 참 라테네 니람 denso nalaya ngaran sagi chisegoreta ta soso gi droduk nye sagi tende gi namgyun gi drotang denso chi koshar yongyere ani soso che yonde tambala ta soso nangi yongzin yarwa nangi yongzin se yonde kora ta chi chik le gyunre ha kongengi chisegoreta soso sem yarwa o dadi landor gi ne shinkengi nangi yongzin dige 아니 참참라 니람 나라 예비기 레가 제타여라 어디 디기요 말에 람네야 니람 양까지코 고네야 고축 투바라보더니 고갑니바라고 제 용결했어 빨라 소소 니람 나라치 디바라치 사우조 체기여나서 드니야 소소 난기 용진디기 더 코란 겨와 땅네야 양까코 니람 난기 고갑더니 디 람가 셴파네 조 투베기 투비야기 치 고갑니바라보더니 제 용결했어 디치 딱 장보레기 드가스치레사 가셔래 디짜침보이나 디드가스치 딱 남긴 나진라고던데레서 거 긴댕기 직 자와레스 칸데라오레스 만데 나다 긴댕기 자와세 요레트네 케침보라나다 짜침보라오던데라오치 케침보라오던데 네 침보르치레베스 디소서 남기 용젠데서 니람기
India ingresam shukchigni yabo ndawri yobodo kadiritina mu korantini blantorla when sefchongjan chachmdawo kareyna ta shawa kang tangna chachmdawo yongkhan tini kangjong manjong maching kandiona kochola nong yongjen tambo yori tijim sangar mulam gar kamna nong yongjen go rukhasya when nga chor mulam ta chogmokcho yar mulam ta kama magyavya tenda kacha yori nong yongjen go rokashni te yapori yena ngalam gar namjur shapi ni kabla te karchimbo jata yo mare karjina ngalam yimba ngohia de karchimbo yori ngohini no da ngalam de ta ngalam ga thaso na te de kje ya ta ne teni jinsha je ya te re chika yo mare de tam chun chura re ja ti ton in jogori ngalam ngohia ga to ni jogori man ngalam thaso na teni te haliwa zabzab yori moda ya go tangare khala zabzab shini zagare kacha ya go shagare te je 때 실상 역벌이다는 얘나 덴전라고 또 데라마 또 그런 거 난줄라 판바가 까차 말와.
So okay. On the one hand, this is sounds like, you know, a good thing to have a conscience, a sort of inner guide, an inner guide of your conscience that has a very strong core of moral fiber, that sort of knows right from wrong, that has this inner kind of compass of doing what is right and keeping your vows and keeping your precepts and being an upstanding person of integrity and, you know, making sure not to fall into, you know, corruption and all of that inner guide, that you call it the subconscious, that's, you know, on the one hand very good. And a person who has a strong inner conscience, that person's sort of inner wisdom, they will naturally arise in the dream state as well, to sort of guide that person so that even in the dream you don't kill, you don't
you don't even kill in the dream, you don't steal in the dream, because you have that inner conscience, that the subconscious that is driven by that inner guide, and that is going to definitely be informing your dream state. But the thing is that as far as whether it's important for the dream yoga context, the most important goal of dream yoga is to recognize, first and foremost, recognize the dream to be a dream and not to get caught up in the realness of that phenomena in the first place. And so, because the whole point is not to have grasping onto it as being real or as actually happening, if you can recognize the dream. Otherwise, just being kind of going down, one particular route so that you're very mindful, and in the dream, you're really driving a car, you're going to carefully drive that car because your conscience is keeping you going, and you're going to eat very mindfully, and wherever you go, you're very like careful person, or as far as like where you're led to go in your dream and so forth. What's more important than that is, are you decreasing your grasping at the realness of the phenomena? So that's what's more important in the dream, is to recognize the dream to be a dream. As far as like what you do in the dream and where you go and so forth, is the grasping at the realness decreasing, and are you recognizing the dream?
Are we experiencing things from our store consciousness as everything comes from there? So we are in a cycle where nothing we know is reasonable. It's just all whatever we put in there previously. If we change the input to bodhicitta, how do we know it's genuine and not a trip?
Okay, I'm trying to think like, how do I translate trip? But I kind of get it. I will. Rumati Kinso on a trip saying on to get you say that midden such some lachik migi trunang yarwa. Trunang the midden so zejer cheshak bagi chi kor zeden so yarwa nyoze mambo tama than the two on the zamalachik wuzilla that didn't demo mambo toya double that damn mindra than the tornang mandoa than the soya yarwa. The money gets tornang numbore sosogi miki nang la chi koshaya de shagir is the soso semnalea chi kasure di ngoma ya rangani dubio maratina sosogi simgi trunang soso da chisore da chonchu dabore simgi chonchu dabo sometimes la zejo than such on the zambala ze damanda than the sign nyoze than like the chi 통용 거와 코란기 카르시거스나 ngazo 군지 남시시에 제로 알아야디 ngazo 군지 남시디 나올라 다 sabun 칸땀나 ngaranso sabun din서기 치서거래 직스 surfo 용기열에 아니 발라 예비기 출도 내대기열에 드니 칼리 컨산치 라켄다 체소나다 소소 치코 surfo 용기열에 ngaranso 기다 sabun 다 장축기 심기 sabun디 탑경체나 테니 칼리 컨산치랑 안서 기치 소낭 라보치글라 갈스그래 문이기다 양 다퍼드는 용거를 배사 카이스는 가란서기 통체 탐제 고체 탐제 삼체 탐제 출낭 말에 배사 아니 출낭이나 아니 가서 장축기 생기 똑받은 소양 출낭 차도기 열에 배사 가서 출바다 지스그래다 양다비기 내룩다 아니 출낭 디니 현재 제야디 가서 현재 제시서를 배사 장점 기세
대 저와야 보리 닌자 고고도 대고 설봉고 추송 대 대다리 대 할리와야 보리 덴바레 쇼치니 있더니 다리가 어저 건접급 샤와 강리나 샤와치고 셈케나 데니 캬브선로와이나 땅아 조더니 가리치나 처마오 건접 캬르캬레 이나 데 데제야 지고레 데니 건접 데라야 템추데 when ngacho tata konjop karna ware yena konjop tela dupode gagayo mare yashute gagayo re ra when ngacho konjop yena yang konjop dembala tini nana gaga mare mana na gagre sem tari dugna gaga mare kinna gagre kinna tela tini konjop khorang nangla korum mambo yore tez yakshu tenda oguni shanchu ge semla teni ne teni tari ge shanchu chok to sem kedni konjop karna wande Purto shwa chi purto shwa konzob gnawa thamche gnani devim thartu padawo bena dewa chandes ken roya ro tera chik sona teli par tondam lan roya ri tela tondam lan rona tini sar gya ro ni bi tela tondam de bi na rona tini konzob chu chama yu yare yenna yang konzob gnangla yakshu thamche lan ro gore ma ta dushu thamche ko thokala de go mare di gyumchang ko konzob de choksa ko dpa ya go gubala gongji khamna wa chhe yakpo je tim du yakpo nyung Tielaf tenin tartulandro, Tokcheni Cheni Yaria Doya, Tendra Kachari, T. Jimsang Jontamjek, Kamna, Lam Jib Dembate, Maumbana Pangshari, Jelavanda, Tendra Chakayore, somewhere.
So that's a very, very good question. So on the one hand, everything is, on the one hand, from the relative truth perspective, there's a degree of like, even when you're giving rise to bodhicitta, even when you're taking refuge and giving rise to bodhicitta, there's still a sense that there's a little bit of almost like a falsity to it, because it's still a layer of conventional truth. It's a relative truth phenomena. And yet, even within the dimension of relative truth, of phenomenological expression, we have preferences in terms of better and better, good or bad, better or worse. For example, we're all within the relative truth phenomena, but in relative truth, maybe we are experiencing the appearance of being sick. Well, we prefer to be healthy and not sick. When we're sick, we don't like it. When we're not sick, we like it. So, but this is all still the same level, relative truth dimension phenomena. The same way, like our minds, we are happy when we're not feeling emotionally upset or depressed. We prefer to be happy. We want to. So in other words, there's a sort of a distinction between the different levels of relative truth, all the way until you get to the ultimate truth nature. Within relative truth, there's levels of evolution, spiritual evolution. And so, for example, when you are giving rise to bodhicitta, as you say, planting the seeds of bodhicitta in the all-ground consciousness and the storehouse consciousness, eventually your relative truth phenomena will be Dewachen Pure Land, right? Because you have created this phenomena of the bodhicitta. So you're in the Dewachen Pure Land, and that's the Buddha field. That's still relative truth. It's just higher level relative truth. Ultimately, the highest is absolute truth, ultimate truth, wherein relative truth is sort of absorbed into this absolute truth nature, which is Buddhahood, right? That's the ultimate attainment. But until then, we are ascending like the staircase. We are ascending higher and higher through the levels of spiritual evolution. And as we ascend to these higher levels of spiritual evolution, we're going to higher and higher and more exalted states of that relative truth phenomena. And so what is one level of practice, one level's what is to be abandoned, what is to be purified, is the other level's path. And then ultimate path is everything is to be renounced, or rather, the lam gi dembadi pangjaris swimba. Lam gi dembadi pangjaris.
Lamdin Zeguna, Tatani, Shanchum, the same Kepalaso, but some Lamdin, they Honi de Darna, then you men Jongra rest. The metal Hankoroni poem, Mount Bala Hankoroni poem, Meperso, Toktabris. The Madarna made in Jongo Maris. The
pay up there.
Data the Gunzuk, the Muksonam Gotsoda, Mumei, Tsonivo, Korang of Sarnena, Korang, Jima Koronia, Mapachini, Tondam de Bakorang of Javare, the Yena, the Gorezima, Orange, Janata, and you may Barkamara, Tenda Chico.
Okay, so this is what it means when you say that the truth of the path is ultimately renouncing it all. That means that, like, for example, if you have two wooden sticks, and you rub them together through the friction, you're going to produce fire. The sparks are going to ignite, and eventually the fire will blaze, and it will even devour these wooden sticks. It will even be devoured by the flames of this fire that the sticks. So you rub the sticks together. You need the sticks in the beginning to get the fire. But once the fire starts going, the sticks become engulfed in that fire. The fire swallows even the sticks that it was used to make the fire. In other words, we need these relative truth practices and these relative truth, stages, bodhicitta, giving rise to bodhicitta, gathering the accumulations of merit, which are they take a reference point, and then the accumulations of wisdom, which are beyond frame of reference. These are like the two sticks. And you rub the sticks together. What's the ultimate purpose of that? You want to make a fire. Well, once the fire starts to blaze, the sticks become absorbed. They become burned up in that very fire. So ultimately, when you realize the ultimate truth, all of these relative truth practices, merit, accumulations, bodhicitta, all these practices are designed to get you to realizing that ultimate truth. And in that absolute, ultimate, ineffable truth, that ultimately absorbs, encompasses all of the relative truth practices. They're ultimately to be let go, ultimately to be sort of swallowed up in that ultimate truth. But until then, if you just sit there and say, oh, well, ultimately these two sticks are going to be swallowed up in the fire, I don't need them anyway, well, you'll never get the fire to swallow them up in the first place. So you need them for a time. These are relative truth practices.
Is the purpose of the second stage to clear away karmic dreams in order to be able to rest in Rigpa during sleep? I'm wondering why we spend time on recognizing the dreams and acting within them.
Tanadi rimba sumgi nangni nipadi trogyurgi nanjar teniche ati ko nilam danso chik panasoso nilam imba ngonzin che tsasama sosoki teni dramendra zotubia chero nilam nangi ani di goba raw di ngaranso pakcha legi pakcha denso jaya ki chela rebe ki kaisana nguni chanchana tatuk di rigba ngonzin che di rawasa Tina riba ngonzen che ki lamgi shorla ngaranso ki chi trogyor che ki ta gyunsan gope gyunsan raw khane
Gyumsan ngumate te chogore kare arnawate khwena no dembar meya khwena tadanga muchigi nga yetam ga halok sona chogoyore tama nga chada uji chaksona chogoyore tirna dawo hiya demba meya te kangina kang gyurturwa tira Akanda dawo te chogore ma to ko churgir kabla muksar ke chi jan la yang tini warchasa ya dang phando ya dang yarman do tamota ya tinda che muksar karchi shute te mare karcha shute tirna dawo ha ko ya tini dembar mat bhungla min try in ti kamna tini karichina choya dawo tang rang chuk tamba ga rang jing dembar to ba me ya ko ya ga chet churgir da manda chegres.
The main purpose of the second phase is to recognize that all appearances are unreal. And when you recognize that, it's like the fact that you can, in a single moment, you can self-arise as the Yidam deity. And the next moment, you can be a bird. You can self-arise in any and all possible forms. What that's showing you is the lack of an inherent solidity and inherent realness to any of this appearances. That is in this nature that you can sort of arise in any and all forms because of the nature of this illusory, unreal state. And the most important thing is not to be able to go out and, do miracles and, benefit, make a big spectacle or be able to see all different things. The whole purpose of the second stage is so that you can become aware of really realizing this point, which is that there is no inherent existence, the grasping onto the realness and the solidity, things being fixed and stuck in one way because you recognize the illusory fluidity of the appearances. And ultimately the purpose is to erode and break down this thinking of things as being very real and solid and fixed.
What color is the single tigle at the throat?
To make it I think we said that it was white, but if we didn't, then that just means the translator. I probably didn't translate that then, but it's a white color.
And if one recognizes the clear light at death, then does the consciousness stay there?
Namshide yendrugyerebe ko ne degere so the chiwegi kapso jio said the munchana chitsa
tata is tiengu zembar shepala tata skeni war dur kabla ripa ngum chod yo go yore ngum chod jagna tini sana ti korang kare ti talagni ni san jado gore kare jina ti osarje ate te chikare semchen je gona ti jamba chi mubo jamba chi ma korang ga chu sem gu chuni tata sem de lan chura na ba na chukra la resti ma bo yora ti da chama me par chani ni lu rangjin ngoma te khar yong gu yore sem korang rangjin de churmon de gerni ti o nga tata ti ni ndamanda te ni yurtang yurcheng ga nin yo ban de so chama minds tini ti rangin da una padrogo yore mak to ne tini 주 가리제 고래 무보 잠바치 살와치 작다야 연거 말이 다당가 저 기르니 와 갑라요 조바 침부리 빵 모차야 때 때다 치바리 때 치바리 때 하고나 선은 치바차 돼요.
That's what I'm gonna say. So first, during your life, you have to have a recognition where you're introduced to the nature of your mind, the nature of your rikpa, your pure awareness. And then when in the dying state, then you can recognize the pure awareness. And when you recognize it, that's just simply you awaken, you become Buddha. And so, for example, in that luminosity, that lucid awareness, then you suddenly realize like all of this, getting caught up in all of this dualistic grasping at subject and object and getting totally absorbed in this like display. Now you see, oh, okay, this is mind. This is the true nature of mind. And there's just this recognition. And that's it. You recognize it, then you see beyond the duality of subject and object, the play of subject and object interplay, because now you are in this basic awareness, you recognize it, and that's enlightenment. And Dzogpa Khenpo, you talk about recognizing the pure awareness or the rikpa, it's the same thing. But the important thing to know is that when you recognize this pure awareness, when you have this recognition, it isn't like you suddenly attain something new, like you find this new realization, like that you just like get something new. It's simply recognizing your own mind's nature as it has always been, and just recognition of that. It's not like this new procurement of something new like that.
디타소나 때지 리라보리 다다이나가 존디 폼보르나랍 덩전 죽차르니네 드니 때 할리와 때니 바로 과리안다고라 할리와 깔리 카보 셔차르데 우리 폼보르가 보다 덩전 죽 선어 폼보르가 보 나온거 폼보르가 보고 육차르니네 그리고 악식보 메피 깔라 무제잖아 때니 잠바체 까메피 gemsen기 람상트니 니두konga 타칸도야 다 텐다치그레 테마토고 테 콜라 기셰드 시게야만두다 다샤나 저타톤다 요사마리.
That's okay. It's a little hard to recognize that basic pure awareness when we're still constrained by the 5 skandhas, the 5 aggregates. When we have this physical body and we have the 5 aggregates, our consciousness is very much, there's a sense of ego identification, and the grasping at the self, the realness of the 5 skandhas is very strong. So it's difficult to get outside of the framework of the 5 aggregates. But when we die, we're no longer encumbered by these 5 aggregates. So all we have is just mind, awareness. And so it's a lot easier to be able to glimpse that expression of that basic awareness, because you're not sort of encumbered by this shell of the aggregates. So it's like hard to kind of explain, because we're very much attached within the framework of the 5 skandhas right now.
the regios skanda kharwacha maqtuk tin de ticho thong yemba gemsi cherejena wardo gorna wa kharjok tin yang pombor nga wala dak tu zo charwari tini ti wardo go semchela pombo ji mangji dupi pombo ze anda otang tini wardo rang yelu ze atang ti taso na wardu taso la kergana chi dungar mambo yo ni ti taso ya di pombo yore pombo yo na yinamna nga chum mukum thonggo I pomba yo mare ko yengo wi kyawa yo mare ko ranguni pombo yo paro zo charje ti gemsang는 10년일 감나 까지 토토토토 지금 또 거까 마야 gemsen들이 바둥고 쭉 니감나 닌진기 마트거든 했더니 영 열다 열전 나요 삼차님 정도 영더니 일루고 pombo 랑 테마 따라니 일루고 pombo 쪼공 그래 티 마트 비응올라 티초 토토 마트요 말이 다데.
And that's why we say that there's only a brief moment, very, very brief moment where you have the dawning of this ground awareness, this ground luminosity. The reason is because the very subtle moment that the appearances of the pardo begin to arise, there is the sort of the bifurcation of self and other. And that very moment that you have the arising of the pardo appearances, you already have a semblance of the skandhas. You don't have the 5th skandha. You have the 4 skandhas because you don't have the physical corporeal form yet, but you have a mental body. And the moment that you have the idea of there being an outside object and a self perceiving these outside objects, that I'm over here and then there's all this going on out there. There's that duality of the self, the subject, the experiencer and that which is being experienced, the object, that sort of separation, then that's from that point on you have the aggregates, there's the skandhas. So that's why it's just very brief, usually the moment where the pure awareness dawns, very brief, because the moment that there's this there's a sense of a self and then a sense of other. And then from then on, you're still encumbered by aggregates. You may not have a physical body that others can see, but you're still experiencing a lot of the suffering of birth, aging, sickness, and death. You still have the experience of all this phenomena because now you have the self and other, the subject-object duality. And then that's the framework that then you become operating in. So that's why that moment, that interlude of the pure awareness is very brief usually.
Where can we find and get access to the Bardo prayer and the other prayers that Khenpo has been referring to?
Okay. So Julie, Khenpo has entrusted us all to figure that out. So you and me will, and all the people at the TLC, we'll try to find those prayers and we'll make those available.
Yeah. Tini injika yapo yang gyro na nyaga nyuga ma ba tino yakshu chi khungdan da yapo chi tin yang ramanda gyndro ndo ata so yapo chi cheni tani da yena chixinan di bardom thor molam de te loza ba house ja chin do atichu na lan duk sam so te ona yago yori di sama ta la khakore.
Yeah, so and then just make sure that the one that we find has, the translation is accurate, that all the words are properly printed, that there's some nowadays you find all kinds of corruptions in various different translations, this taken and different pieces left out and so forth. So try to have the best. Lotsawa House might have one a version of these prayers, but just make sure that it's a reliable source, reliable translation, and all the words are there.
Okay. There's one more question.
Okay.
If one realizes the ultimate truth, would one achieve the same level of merits as Buddha, such as the 32 signs, having one's own pure land, and so on?
So dandam gine loktok sona sangi dan janchip semba den sonaje soso giku dan kin khor dan shinkam dan digi de changma trutu gerevesa.
Te sa tambo ni ngop chu greze yori tambo sa tambo ni chunin won sam dum thong ze yori teni taron yarji nda wondro ni teni chok sak drba jan sap chwa ma tuwa ti to yen rang gor gerem thongwa jam ji na tim chu te chaga mare teni yena yar kom ni na teni te huk chembo chana sa ki da thong.
Oh yeah, so gradually, as you go through the different bodhisattva stages, you have to get first to the first bhumi, the bodhisattva bhumi. And once you get through each stage, then you can ultimately get to the place where you're able to emanate and manifest your own pure land and Buddha fields and all that, but not in the beginning. First, you have to go through ascending to the different stages. So even you realize the ultimate truth, but there's stages still of that realization, stages that you go through as you ascend through each of the bodhisattva bhumis or stages.
Oh yeah, teni tandixwa. Okay?
Okay.
Teni tester chunchenin gi birgi tawan dim chon tirsam de so bit gerta tam chik tu du de mater semjen tam che dungar gimdir ni tam trar tande lana me pa sargi ki komba to par kirchig nyam bir ngoa tam monlam de la tendra son.
Oh, okay. So sorry. Yeah, so the virtue accumulated by the practice of listening and practicing this, we gather that together with all the roots of virtue ever accrued, past, present, and future throughout the 3 times, and we dedicate that. And so as Rinpoche is holding up the prayer, you can see, but it's basically the dedication prayer for concluding the full.
Tiniti tokala tini nga cho tada jiktin ke kamdala ya tini chiga karelab gore tini nad mug chukso la so pa jir tini che ran nad mit deskil la so pa ta tamche ta dan sakwal ta ngaran so chama tini ta chendelam jopam nyoram nyurt zopa chembola so bitawa yakbo gyula kiwi chet na ngwa ta molam te ananga yens.
Essence is that by the power of this merit, may all the beings and specifically for this planet, this earth, may we be free from epidemics, sickness, war, famine, and suffering of all kinds, and may we all enjoy long life and good health and happiness and success, and ultimately may all beings recognize the true nature, and may the view of the Dzogpa Khenpo clear light luminosity, may that awaken in our minds, and may all beings have that realization.
Sunam di tamcha zibanya tomne nibi dana pache jang kirga nanchi ralong dubai. Tubim solin doa durwara shon jawara wawu chirtaram chemba tang kanda zambo teyang tepsen de teta kanji jisa daloch. Givan da tamcha rabdar ngo durje lokon jam jipandu genda dembra kurlo geden dembra shadu tamba tarang kurlo jenda ngatang jorwa tamba yana nibi brashi sho tuji che che namba tamala. Thank you everyone.